Good evening. I'd like to call the Traffic and Safety Commission meeting to order. Can we have the roll?
Commissioner Chomsky,
Present.
Commissioner Jovedal,
Present.
Commissioner Del Rosario,
Present.
Commissioner Reeves,
Present.
and Chair McCroskey.
Present. I think the commissioners received a draft version of the minutes from our last meeting. Do we have any comments on the draft or changes to the draft minutes that we received? Can I get a motion?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Great. So we've approved the minutes. And we should move on to the next item, which I believe is, yes. So we have a public comment period for any item not otherwise on the agenda this evening. We give you 3 minutes to speak on any topic that is not otherwise on the agenda tonight. Is there any interest? No? Seeing none, we'll move right along. Do we have a police report this evening?
We do. Thank you. Full screen. There we go. So we didn't have data to present to you at your last meeting, so this runs through February of 2018 now, getting caught up. And a series of graphs. This starts with pedestrian collisions per month. And as you can see, there seems to have been a surge in, unfortunately, pedestrian collisions reported to the police department. The overall trend line is increasing rather gradually, at averaging roughly 1 collision per month. But over the last 6 or 8 months or so, there have been more than usual, which is alarming. So that, we are trying to make arrangements for the police chief to attend your next meeting, and we can talk about the scheduling of that, but he may be able to provide some insights into some of these trends, particularly when we get to the citations and DUIs. This is bike collisions per month. Again, the trend is gradually increasing and overall averaging about 1 a month. Had a spike in January, but February is back to average. And this is motor vehicle collisions per month. The top number is the total number of collisions, and the top graph is total number, and the gray is the injury collisions involving injuries. The overall trend for the overall number of vehicle collisions is decreasing slightly, which is good news. The number of injury collisions is increasing slightly over the last couple of years. So that is, obviously, again, in particular, any collision involving injuries is of concern. These are the trends in citations, motor vehicle citations, and I know you have an interest in understanding, getting insights from the police chief about what these trends are and how they, what might be contributing to this change. And then this is the trend in DUI arrests. Again, this is declining, and police chief can speak to some of the reasons that would be behind that. Happy. I probably won't be able to answer any questions, but if you have any, I'll try, and otherwise have the police chief prepared to do his best when he comes to speak to you.
I don't really have a question, but my observation is that some of the worrisome looking graphs where things seem to be going up, the numbers are actually very low, and they may be too small to draw any great conclusions from. I mean, I'd still like to talk to the police department about it, but to me, the trends that are more convincing are the ones where the numbers are in the double digits, and you can really see some statistical.
We could. It's not hard to do statistical analysis of this, if you really wanted to get that deep into it.
But I don't think there's enough, I don't think there's enough incidents to gather
Probably.
statistics that are all that. I mean, it's nice to see them, and I'm glad to have it and to be put on notice that there may be an increase going on here. But I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions that something bad is going on in this particular graph when the numbers are generally 0, 1, and 2.
If I can add, it would be good for when PD comes at the next meeting for them to talk about if their coverage is consistent from day to day or month to month, and if that affects the trends or the numbers that we're seeing.
I think it does, and there's the number of officers that they have, the other things that they're working on. There are grant programs that come and go that have traffic enforcement focuses. There are DUI enforcement programs where the state will pay overtime to have extra officers for DUI enforcement, and those programs come and go. I don't know the details of them, but I do know that there are ebbs and flows to those programs that may affect. And then they may have some emphases on where they're focusing their law enforcement efforts. And, you know, if the number of citations is decreasing but the number of burglary arrests or something is increasing, that's good news. It just means that they're doing other types of investigations.
Sure.
I'm still glad to see the information in this way, but I agree. It's the benefit of living in a small town. The numbers aren't so.
And the chair particularly will be pleased to know that this data has been posted on the web this afternoon, shortly after we got it from the police department, and we'll catch up and put the old ones back for the previous meetings.
You know I was going to ask that.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. I'm always glad to see the data. This is definitely a step up from the sort of scattershot
Yes.
monthly shots that we got previously. It gives us a much better overall trend, even if it's limited data. It at least is presented as a continuum that helps a lot. I'm also interested in what other numbers we should be looking at. Like, what should we be comparing this to? What's the trend in California? I've read some articles recently that have said that the trend for pedestrian collisions has been up in the last 2 years in general, nationwide, including California. Have you seen that? You know, this is not, you know, a full statistical survey, but some of the numbers are showing that. So it'd be interesting to see what we could compare our numbers to. And they may be low, what do you call that? There's a low base in Albany, but it may be very reflective of what's going on overall anyway.
There's a lot of very interesting data out there, both locally and you know, statewide and nationally. And if we had more time, we could make really interesting analyses and comparisons. We'll do our best. You know, I'd love to be able to do there's what's called the Switters reports, which are analyses of detailed information on the collisions in town, and be fascinating to be able to spend some time and be able to show where the collisions are happening and what's contributing to the cause of those collisions. And we just need the time to do that analysis.
I understand. So what I'm more asking for are there one or two state numbers that align fairly well with the data we're collecting that might be good comparisons on an ongoing basis? I'm not asking you to do a full search and analysis, just a kind of what might be available.
Okay.
Thank you.
See what we can find.
And in asking the chief to come, it'd be great if he could bring the dates of those special enforcements specifically, which I think you already know. So, great.
Thank you.
So we've asked questions and expressed some opinions. Are there any public comments on the police report data? Great. Are there anything further from the commission?
Nope.
All right. Great. Let's move right along. We're going to go into the discussion and action section number 6. And we have 6.1, the update on the implementation of gig car share in Albany.
Yes, several meetings ago, you received a presentation from representatives of Gig Car Share about a program that they're rolling out. To refresh your memories, Gig Car Share, it's a organization that's affiliated with the AAA, the California State Automobile Association. It's a one-way car share. If you've been in Berkeley or Oakland, you've probably seen them. It's a Toyota Prius with a bike rack on it and Gig Car Share painted prominently on it. And if you sign up for the program through a smartphone, you can locate the nearest available car, activate the app, the car unlocks, you can get in and drive wherever you're going. And if you return it into the home zone that they call it, which at this point in time is Berkeley and Oakland, at the end of your trip, you park it, you indicate that you finished your trip on the app, and you're done. You get charged for the time you use the car, and then someone else can come and use it. Gig has a new shipment of Priuses coming in, and they would like to roll out the service in Albany. We've talked to them about what would be involved with that. We've consulted with the police department about parking enforcement. And on an initial basis, what we've come to the conclusion is probably easiest for everybody is just to treat it as any other motor vehicle. And so they will be allowed to end the trip anywhere in Albany, except, and they are going to set up so the trip cannot end in a 90-minute zone. So if you're coming to Albany and you're just going to lunch and then you're going to drive back to someplace else, or even drive to park it in a non-90-minute zone in Albany, that's fine, but you couldn't end your trip in a 90-minute zone. But otherwise, you could end your trip in Albany, and then the next user can come along. Presently, they have about 150 members in Albany that are using the service, but even though they can't end their trip in Albany, they'd like to roll out approximately, they think they can successfully use 20 vehicles in Albany and keep them moving. They, obviously, to make money, they need to move the cars on a pretty regular basis, so they prefer that they not sit for very long. So we're inclined to let them go ahead and try that. They would have the same parking enforcement provisions that anybody else would have. And hopefully it's a program that is going to allow people to maybe not get that second or third car or if they have visitors or whatever. It's a service for Albany residents and businesses. As with Lime bikes, the conclusion that we've reached is that we don't have any regulatory requirements for something like this. As long as they're not asking for special treatment, we don't need a special agreement with them, and that we would just work with them as it rolls out and see if there are any problems, and if there are problems, we'll work with them to resolve them. So far, that's kind of what has happened with Lime bikes. There were a few phone calls the first week or two of like, what's this thing? But pretty quickly, it's been normalized and it's not been a problem at all. I don't think we've gotten a call in a few weeks. And the same goes with Gig Car. I think if someone was upset about a car being parked in front of their home, which is probably the most likely complaint we'd receive, they have people who move the cars around to put them in places where they think they're going to be used the most, and they will just simply come over and move the car, so if necessary. So they're talking about rolling it out in the next few weeks. As their new shipment of vehicles becomes available, they like to put them into operation. Interestingly enough, when they showed, I don't know if they showed this to you when they were here, but when we were meeting with them the other day, they activated the app as we were sitting there, and a number of vehicles were lined up just south of the Albany border in Berkeley. It was probably Albany residents who parked as close as they could to Albany and then parked and had to walk the rest of the way. So,
I saw a bunch there on Saturday.
yeah. So anyhow, that's something that if they have some sort of a kickoff event, we'll let the commissioners know about that. We're exploring that possibility here in the next couple of weeks. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So the plan is to expand the existing home zone and integrate Albany into the same home zone. So when they say 20 cars in Albany, they're not designating 20 specific cars to belong to Albany. They're just adding 20 to the fleet, and they'll try to redistribute them so at any given time, approximately 20 of them are in Albany.
That's correct. Based on the population density in Albany, they think that 20 cars will be used on a regular basis.
Okay.
And initially, at least, they said they're going to try to park the cars near where some of their existing customers are. So hopefully, their existing customers kind of get the first shot at it. But they will be constantly adjusting it to demand. If demand is really, if it's very successful here in town, which would be great, there'll be more cars. If it's less successful, there'll be fewer.
Okay.
So you'd mentioned that we'd essentially treat them like any other car, the only difference being, and this isn't our rule, but their rule, that they can't end a trip in a 90-minute zone. So if someone did check out a gig car, drove and parked on Solano in a 90-minute zone, went into a store, bought something, came back out, the whole time it was parked, it would still be part of that checkout period.
Right. Right.
And if they happened to stay there for 2 hours, we would have chalked the tire, come back 90 minutes later, and issued a citation.
Right. And
like
then
another car.
GIG will send the citation to the person who rented. They can tell when the ticket was issued, and the person who rented the car gets the ticket.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
and if for some reason that person doesn't pay it, GIG will pay it. So from the city's perspective, it's no different.
Gotcha.
And that restriction will be noted on the app when you make the reservation for the vehicle?
Apparently, the app won't it knows exactly where you, due to the GPS, it knows
okay.
exactly where you are.
So don't park here.
And we're going to verify that with them to make sure we've got the boundaries of the 90-minute zones right. And then it will just say, sorry, you've got to move the car before you can end your trip.
How often do those boundaries change? Like less than once a year, I would assume.
Our 90-minute zone boundaries?
Yeah, we
Pretty rarely.
never. Okay.
I think if we've done one, I mean, maybe we've done it for changing something. I mean, we're talking here later this evening about parking zones, so maybe something will change between a red zone and a green zone and a 90-minute zone or something.
Well, we put in 90-minute zones down near Albany Beach or something at some point a couple of years ago.
Okay. So
Right.
maybe every few years.
Yeah.
So when there is a change like that, it would have to be coordinated with.
It would be good to do that, but even if we fail to do that, forget to do that, the driver still is responsible for looking at the sign and realizing that even if it lets them end a trip where they shouldn't, they'll still get a ticket and they'll still pay it.
Okay.
Are they programming in the street sweeping?
Yes,
So that'll also come
yes,
up.
thank you for
Great.
that. Yeah, we've given them that information as well.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Seeing none, we'll open this to public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to make public comment on gig car share in Albany? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Are there any commissioners who wish to express opinions on the proposal by staff? Actually, I would. I think trying this out is great. I'd be interested in having some kind of check-in at a certain point, maybe 6 months out. And maybe that's as simple as having them come back here to traffic and safety and providing space for people to come and make comments. But I'm interested in not just letting it flow, but having a check-in.
I'm sure we can make arrangements for that, yeah.
Okay.
I'll kind of follow up on that, which if they can provide staff with, if GIG can provide staff with reports of usage numbers and duration of parking events, things like that, that will probably be helpful to you in answering public questions when someone says, hey, this car's been parked in my neighborhood, because GIG knows exactly how long every car is parked in every spot, and they can show you something that says, you know, how many cars have parked for more than 3 hours or 2 days, and that number should be very low.
Right, yes, yes. Well,
So I'm curious, do they provide those to Berkeley?
They do,
How often?
quarterly.
Okay.
And you know, the good news is since the inception of the program, they've tracked how many cars have theoretically been parked for the 72-hour time limit. And it's like out of 13,000 trips, it's like 168 parking events that exceeded that time limit. And they pointed out to us that when they take a car out of service, that actually causes that number to be overcounted. So they take it out of service to go get a tune-up or something. The app shows it as being at the last location it was until they put it back in service. So even that really low number
It's
is
lower.
overreported. So in spite of, a few concerns of, hey, this car's been parked on my street, those are pretty infrequent considering the magnitude of the whole program. And I think the clustering on the home zone boundaries is kind of the natural thing, which thankfully GIG tends to resolve by extending the home zone boundaries because clearly they've got a customer on the other side. And so it's useful to them for their business to be attractive to more customers.
I actually talked to a resident of Berkeley who had that situation in the neighborhood, and they extended the boundary and cleared right up.
Yeah.
So it sounds like maybe after 2 quarters of data might be an appropriate time?
Okay. We'll make sure to do that.
Great.
I saw my first one at my new work, and it was there a day, because it's kind of out on the outskirts, but then it was gone. It's cool.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you. And that moves us on to item 6.2, an update on the Solano Avenue Complete Streets Planning Project.
Yes, good evening. We are moving along with the Solano Avenue
Would you
Complete
like to introduce
Streets.
yourself? You're a rare visitor, so welcome. Yeah.
Here at the city.
I think your microphone missed your name.
Ann Hirsch, planning manager here. So we are pulling things together for Solano Complete Streets. We did consultant interviews in January, and we ultimately decided to retain Tool Design Group out of Berkeley. They are working with Opticos Urban Design as a subconsultant to do the urban design work for the project. We also have Local Government Commission out of Sacramento that will be helping with the facilitation and public outreach. And so right now we are kind of in the early stages of doing existing conditions. The consultant is preparing that. We are going to be doing a walk in a couple of weeks with Berkeley city staff to walk the corridor and identify kind of key issues within the corridor in preparation for the plan. We anticipate having our technical review committee meeting a couple weeks after that. There's more details to follow. And then kind of big picture, we're looking at workshop and design charrette at the end of May after the Memorial Day holiday. And again, we'll have all of those details finalized, but that's kind of the initial targets that we have on the horizon. Ideally, we would come back in September if things work out. We're also tentatively planning a demonstration for Parkin Day, which is the 3rd Friday in September. And then shortly thereafter, we'd have a final draft document with recommendations for improvements in the corridor. So we will you'll probably be seeing more of me specifically on this particular planning process, coming back to traffic and safety with updates.
Great. Questions from commissioners?
So given how the parking study didn't lead to some solid recommendations, is it correct to say that it would be too ambitious to look at curb space management as part of this study? I mean, we just talked about a previous item about gig car, and so there's limitations on Solano for having gig cars there. But there's going to be other uses that'll become more and more prevalent other than just standard parking. So I don't know if there's that opportunity here, or is that just too much for us to bite off?
I think there will be an opportunity for that because we're looking not only at the corridor, but kind of the usage basically from the sidewalks to the street to managing on-street parking. So I think we will have opportunities to look at that more closely.
The other Complete Streets project took all of it into, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Any public comment? Please, sir, come on up. We'd love to get your name. And if you have time to fill out a comment card from the back, we'd appreciate that for taking the minutes. After you speak, sure.
My name's Tom Newton, and I live in the 900 block of Santa Fe, which is between Marin in Solano, and we've lived there for 46 years, which is longer than most of you have been alive, I think. Anyway, I had asked to be part of the stakeholders committee that would be involved in this Complete Streets thing, and I was assured that I would be, but then I hear you saying you've had all these, first of all, the next step on the agenda makes me think that there's been previous steps, and then you talk about the consultants and the technical staff and the Sacramento, and I just wonder how much has been, I mean.
This has all been very preliminary. It's just been staff working with a consultant on a
what?
schedule, a schedule for the plan preparation. We will have information available on the website once we have dates confirmed.
You understand my concern that like things are moving along and I don't know what they are. I mean,
I can get your information and we can touch bases. I mean, I certainly want to include you in the process, but we haven't formally engaged yet in the public outreach process. We've simply been working with the consultants on a timeline of events over the next year.
okay.
Sir, as someone who's been involved in these projects before, what I've heard from staff is that they've been building up the framework of the project, but not the actual details. So they've chosen consultants, they've started selecting dates, and they're going to start publicizing when they're going to be taking back public comment. So I don't think you've missed anything.
All right, that's fine. I will stay tuned.
Yes, please. Any further public comment on the Complete Streets? Or bring it back to the commission for comments? Robert?
So probably just turn my question into a comment and include the curb space management. And I think dovetail off of that, the bus stops along Upper Solano, they're legacy stops for sure. There's bus poles out there that have been out there probably since 1950, 1960. So I think it's a good chance and an opportunity to optimize bus stops, maybe even thin out some bus stops, and repurpose some of those locations for other uses.
You know, those poles are old enough, we can't remove them. They're historic now.
Store landmarks, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think you physically can remove them.
that could be another problem.
But yes, so optimizing the stops that we do decide to keep in place and making sure they're in the right locations, and then maybe there's an opportunity here to thin them out. So I hope we look at that. And then on top of that, there's also opportunities here for stoplet type of treatments like we did down at As You Wish. So hopefully we can look at that too.
I don't have any comments, but I want to remind staff that I live a half block off Solano. I'm interested in participating in the process. I'd like to have a chat with the city lawyer perhaps and figure out how that can work. Any other opinions or comments from the commission?
Just excited to kick it off and get public input.
Thank you for coming and describing the process to us tonight. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
So that takes us to item 6.3. This is the continued encroachment permit request for bus stop relocation at the intersection of San Pablo and Solano. I'll turn it over to staff.
I'm going to excuse myself for this item. Thanks.
Thank you. For anybody who's not clear, Robert Silva Rosario works for AC Transit, so he's recusing himself from the discussion tonight.
So on your agenda this evening is a continuation of the discussion that you had at your last meeting last month regarding the request from AC Transit to relocate the current bus stop on San Pablo, northbound San Pablo bus stop at Solano, to two different locations for the 72 line and the late night 800 line the bus stop relocate from the southeast side of the intersection to the northeast. The terminology that's used in the transit world is going from a near side to a far side bus stop. The benefit of doing this would be that it will significantly improve motor vehicle travel on San Pablo Avenue, which currently backs up at peak hours all the way back here towards Buchanan and Marin. And it also improves the safety for pedestrians who would be crossing San Pablo Avenue and would not have to cross in front of a bus, and often creates a particularly hazardous situation for motorists. The downside is that it impacts businesses on the northeast corner of the intersection. You've heard from those businesses last month, and I believe they're here this evening again. At the Commission's request, created a graphic that I hope helps as what you were looking for, that helps describe the types of modifications to the curbs that would be involved with this relocation. What we're trying to do is to create a bus stop that's about 80 feet in length that accommodates the extended buses that will be using this bus stop, which are 60 feet long buses. So kind of from maybe from the bottom up, currently there's about 65 feet of red zone, 85 feet of red zone. I'm sorry, I was correct. 65 feet of red zone from along San Pablo. That's for the current bus stop. A portion of that red zone would need to stay right at the intersection so that there's good visibility for pedestrians. Otherwise, what's today a red zone could be converted to either a green zone, which I think is perhaps the most convenient for businesses. But as with any of these parking designations, there's flexibility and there's the ability to experiment with and adapt to needs of the people who are utilizing the parking spaces and to the adjacent businesses. But for this graphic, at least, it shows converting the first area to a green zone, which would allow for pickup and drop off and brief visits to businesses. And then beyond that, to the south, having a 90-minute zone. Right now, there's one 90-minute parking space right in front of Mary and Joe's Sporting Goods, and that might make sense to move closer to the intersection. On the other side of Solano, there would be what is now a green zone. 65 feet of green zone would be converted to a red zone, and a portion of the 90-minute zone also would be converted to a red zone, so there's ample room for the bus to pull all the way in. And that's the thing that improves the traffic circulation here, is there's enough room for the bus to get all the way in, so 2 lanes of traffic can flow on San Pablo. And then beyond that, we could create a new green zone to replace the one that's being eliminated, and the size of that green zone can be adjusted again to accommodate business needs. The second part of the relocation would be for the 18 bus, which is coming up San Pablo. It's the 18 that's going first up Solano into Berkeley and then ultimately towards Lake Merritt. And this is a bus that would need to stop as soon as practical after it makes the turn. Keeping the 2 stops together helps with transit patrons that are making a transfer from the 72 to the 18. And so what we've looked at here is 2 different alternatives for a stop at the intersection of Kains, either on the near side or on the far side. One of the considerations for the near side stop is the business owner of Mr. Dewey's has approached us about doing a parklet, a bus stop parklet, and this could be both a great thing for an urban design perspective and also to serve the transit community. In a situation like that, the bus would stop in the lane, bus patrons would get on and off, and then proceed. One of the issues that the commission pointed out last month was that it's not great for pedestrians to have to walk in front. As I mentioned, it's not great for pedestrians to have to walk in front of a bus. So what would be the implications of having a far side bus stop? And while that would improve pedestrian safety, it would involve eliminating additional parking, 90-minute parking zone along Solano Avenue. And this is, from the futon shop up, it's about 7 to 8 parking spaces could be affected. And in this case, it could either be a stop that's in the lane and then some sort of a bus bulb out would have to be built, or it could be arranged so the bus pulls out of the lane of traffic and comes right up to the existing curb. But one way or the other, there would be impacts on parking in that area. So these drawings are roughly at scale, so it does show the parking, generally the parking impacts. On the near side, there would be an impact on 4 parking spaces, and depending on precise measurements, it would be 7 or 8 on the far side. The other information that we collected was whether there would be a possibility to eliminate the right turn for motorists that are going from from Solano onto San Pablo. And let me switch over to Google Earth to show what this is looking at. It's zooming in. This is Solano Avenue horizontally in San Pablo, and whether this right turn could be eliminated or modified for certain hours. And we looked at that, and really it's a pretty heavily used right turn. Some counts were collected and highlighted here in red, and basically getting several hundred vehicles in peak hours, over 100 in peak hours using the right-hand turn. So our inclination is that right-hand turn is a significantly important and should probably stay there. But again, we can take commission feedback on that. In terms of process, this is technically what's called an encroachment permit. At the staff level, we normally approve these things, but because this is an important issue and impacts the community, we wanted to have the Traffic and Safety Commission an opportunity to provide a recommendation, and we feel like this would be something that ultimately the City Council should probably, because it impacts the greater community significantly, something the City Council would be expected to provide final direction on. So this evening, what we're looking for is your recommendation to the City Council, or if you're not prepared to do that, if there's anything else that we can provide you to help you reach your recommendation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Comments?
Can you go back
Questions?
to the pencil drawing, the previous one? Yeah. So the text in the bottom section that says convert green to 90-minute zone, is there an existing green zone there?
There is a small green zone there of one space.
Okay. And so your suggestion is that since we're creating a green zone a little bit north of there, that space doesn't need to be green anymore?
Correct.
Okay, understood.
I'm sorry, I was just looking. So I understand the eastbound 18 stop is paired with a westbound 18 stop that's in front of the theater. And there's another eastbound 18 stop in front of the YMCA between Cornell and Talbot.
In front of Cornell School. Right.
Essentially, yeah. There's a YMCA childcare program along the streetscape there. So if we could flip to the other, so there's a significant non-parking area at the middle and towards the end of the block. Had you considered how many parking spaces are at the other end of the block and near that non-parking area access to driveways as a spot for a bus to stop and pull out?
We haven't talked about that with AC Transit in detail. I don't know if Catherine Vo is here, by the way, with AC Transit. I'm sorry I didn't introduce her sooner. I don't know what the implications would be for them, both functionally as for the drivers, but also keep in mind there is the transfers could be, I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe Catherine, you can help with that. Can you come up to the microphone for us?
Hi, I'm Catherine Vo. I'm with AC Transit. And in regards to your question, to clarify, you're suggesting moving further down Solano towards...
I'm not allowed to suggest at this point. I'm just asking if it was
Oh.
analyzed.
If we've analyzed that. We have not, because the stop spacing wouldn't be ideal. And there would be, basically, you're immobilizing a lot of the users. You take the 18 or the G, because it's both of those stops would be moved onto Solano. And there are potential transfers to the 72s and the 800s. So we would recommend against moving it further up. But in terms of the overall Solano Complete Streets plan, stop rebalancing is an idea, but the closeness and proximity to San Pablo is a prime location.
Thank you for answering my question. Other questions from the commission? Fareed, does this diagram answer what you were asking last time?
It does. So I guess following up on that, as I understand, the way the near side bus stop is set up, if Mr. Dewey's sponsors a parklet, the bus will be stopping in the lane, so there'll be no opportunity for eastbound traffic to pass the bus.
We would bring that to you so you could see the details of the design. We don't have it yet, but yes, I think.
Right, because previously I'd kind of, on my notes, I'd sketched up, either it's at the curb or it's halfway out with the short parklet, or you go with the full parklet and then it's stopped in the traffic lane. And the reason I ask is if it's stopped in the traffic lane, no cars pass it, there's no sightline problem. So near side in the traffic lane is perfect. As compared to, as I look at the drawing now, the far side in the traffic lane may create a problem with sight lines for westbound traffic and people walking behind the eastbound bus. So that's why I ask that if it is a full width parklet, if that's something AC Transit would feel is a safer configuration.
Yes, that's exactly what we would think. We would prefer a full parklet with bollards in the center to prevent any cars going around, similar to what is at Cornell. And as you can see, if we move to the far side, the drawing illustrates the length of our bus, but because it's a bay, if we don't have a bulb out, we'll actually have to remove more parking than is shown.
Okay, thanks.
If the bus is to stop in the lane and cars can't pass, has anybody analyzed how much queuing behind the bus will occur and whether that'll reach back into the San Pablo intersection itself?
That's the risk. The bus is already causing queuing on San Pablo. Where it's stopping now is causing queuing on San Pablo. So, but yeah, that would be the risk, that if there was the bus had to stay there for an extended period of time for some reason, maybe that would be a problem.
Yeah, so currently in doing field work, cars, since this is parking, they do back out, they get out and change parking. And that causes actually probably more delay than our buses would, because our buses stop for, 30 seconds. And in the event that there's a wheelchair, it stops, upwards to three minutes, which is about the same time it takes for someone to safely back out of a parking area.
I go back to the far side of the street, the north side, where the westbound bus stop is, where I've observed almost a bus width and a car width. So if traffic is backed up westbound at the light and cars are stopped in the westbound lane, would there still be enough space for eastbound drivers to see and desire to go around the bus that might be stopped eastbound?
If at the under the near side stop scenario,
Yes.
I think we'd be concerned about that, and the solution would be to put some bollards in the center line to make that, hopefully,
Discourage that.
discourage that. People may run them down, but we'll put it back up again.
Are the bollards working at the other bus stop?
I think so. They're
haven't
they're
been-
there. I haven't seen them knocked over yet.
Yeah,
There are fewer bus, that's not a heavily
I
used
know,
bus stop.
I know,
This
it's
is
a little different,
This is a
but-
busy bus stop.
I have some feedback on that, since it's brought up. I think the bollards actually don't go back further much beyond the bus length. So I'm not sure they were really successful in
doing what?
in design or implementation. I don't know.
So if a car is stuck directly behind the bus and decides it wants to pull around, the bollard doesn't prevent it from doing so.
I think the bollards are not fully successful in preventing that. I think they're a strong visual cue, but I'm
They're
not
not a-
sure that we
not
designed
a
them to go
physical
back far
barrier.
enough. Yeah, I don't think they're a physical barrier. And I also have anecdotal information from the crossing guard at Talbot, who says she's experienced some issues with impatient drivers who are getting backed up through the crosswalks across Solano. I think she or somebody has put some, movable thin bollards. What do you call those? Upright orange sticks out there to support those crosswalks. But that's my information. But that's not on our agenda tonight, so we should move on.
So regarding our agenda, if you were asking us to approve a location for this Solano bus stop, but are you not asking us to consider whether it should be a pullout or an in-lane stop?
We would take any and all recommendations you would like to.
So because sometimes I'm hearing that any decision about a bulb out or a parklet would happen later, but if we have to approve a position for the bus stop tonight, it has to be either a pull-out bus stop or an in-lane bus stop. Is that correct?
Or we make it conditional.
We could bring back to you, possibly quite soon, a parklet design so that it gets implemented altogether. If the parklet moves ahead as we think it might, we could possibly be bringing that back to you in the next couple of months. We haven't seen anything yet, but we might be able to do that, and so it all happens at once.
Okay.
If the parklet doesn't move forward, we would have probably that cross-hatch area there on the near side stop would probably need to be filled in and be in a sense that widen and the bulb out at the crossing area so that that people can get in and out of the bus through the front door. And then
There's a set of garbage cans there too.
yeah, there's a big belly garbage can and something else I think might have to move, but it's not a big thing.
So is it correct that one option for us tonight is to say we approve the near side stop with the exact dimensions and positioning to be determined later?
Yes, that would be
Okay.
perfect.
Any other questions? Then I think we need to open it up to public comment. We welcome your comments for about 3 minutes each. Please, at some point, fill out a comment card and bring it up to the staff at the podium here so we can get your name right in our minutes. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, or good evening, Commissioners. Chris Cole, for the owner of the property. One of the things that was said was that you're looking forward to public comment about the agenda item 6.2. Well, the only public comment that you've heard last time or this time about item 6.3 is people opposing the moving of the bus stop to in front of Max's Liquors. The owners of Max's Liquors are here. They have a petition filed by 500 customers opposing the move. I have a petition that they have obtained from all of the merchants on San Pablo that are affected by this, by the move, as well as merchants on Solano who are opposed to the move of the bus stop in front of Max's. We have only the original signatures of the 500, so we'd like to keep that to make copies. I can certainly show it to you if anybody would like to take a look at them. We do have copies of what's signed by the merchant. So here's your public comment. Here's your citizen comment, is saying, no, don't move this. And the only comment we're hearing about who to want to move it is from AC Transit, which certainly has its vested interest in moving it where it wants to move it, but isn't that in the best interest of your community, not AC Transit's community? These people's livelihood depends on having parking where it is, and to move it back across the street and say, well, that's going to be good enough that the customers are going to cross this street, that's just not true. That's not what's going to happen. And to move the green farther up the block is not going to help in having merchandise unloaded and stocked in the stores. It's simply not going to do that. There are other places you could put this if you need to put it on the far side. Put it farther up the block. There's an empty parking space there. You could put the bus stop in front of that, and the AC Transit customers would have to walk less than 2 minutes back to the corner of Solano and San Pablo, and they can then cross safely there. They'd have to walk less than 2 minutes. That's not asking for too much when you have people's livelihoods at stake here, people who pay taxes here and who need this parking space. If you wanted to move it farther up, you could move it in front of at Washington Street. There's a street light at Washington Street that they could cross. Now, that's not as convenient as San Pablo and Solano, but put it a minute and a half away and have these people walk back and cross the street safely. But don't take away the parking space from people who need it. Do you want me to leave a copy of the petition that was filed by the merchants?
Is it a long statement?
No. It's just really so you can see that the signatures are on it.
I believe you that the signatures are on.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Hello, I'm James Silva. I own Avalon Glassworks at 863 San Pablo.
Sir, if you're going to be referring a lot to the map, you might grab the handheld mic here, and there's a switch on the bottom.
There's a switch on the bottom.
Or a button, I'm not sure.
You got me.
Little red light should come on. I think I heard it turn on. Oh, I hear it.
Newfangled stuff.
Button on the side, near the top.
Hello.
There we go.
Thank you. My name's James Silva. I own Avalon Glassworks. So there's a couple of things. What hasn't been discussed, what everybody is talking about is traffic on San Pablo. For the most part, the buses don't back up the traffic. It's the peak hour traffic. It's what's happening on the highway. So it backs up in the afternoon. In the morning, it backs up in the other direction, and they still have, they have a far side bus stop, but traffic still backs up all the way down San Pablo. It's not going to solve the traffic in the afternoons by moving the bus stop. That's just normal traffic. That's afternoon commute traffic going home. Of bigger concern is the left-hand turn from Solano, if you're heading eastbound. 3/4 of the cars that go left onto San Pablo, basically in front of my shop, 3/4 of those left turns take it wide. This island that's here, this little concrete, it gets bumped over all the time. And I hear it bumped over. So people take it wide. If you're talking about putting a bus stop here and a bus coming out every 5 minutes, while these people are taking this corner wide, you're basically impacting traffic. This left-hand turn is not going to be able to happen with a bus here. Furthermore, at 65 feet, which is basically where they want the bus to stop, with 15 feet to be able to pull out, at least that's what AC Transit said last week, at 65 feet from the corner, there's a tree. You can't load passengers on that front door because there's a tree right there. It's right in front of my shop. And then lastly, the parking. You know, earlier tonight we heard about gig parking, talking about adding 20 cars, full-time cars. The parking issue in the downtown area serves three constituencies, basically residents and employees, people who were there for more than 90 minutes, and 20 minutes. And with the two plans to move this one bus stop, you're talking about eliminating anywhere from what, 12 to 14 spots from both around the corner on Solano and here. It's not just about the 20-minute zone, it's also about the 90-minute zone. It's about the people who come to have dinner. If you go down, if you look at parking on the weekends, it's full. And you're talking about eliminating, on top of the 7 you already eliminated on the back streets, on the corners where you had the safety, where you painted the corners red, extended that out, you eliminated 7 parking spots in the district already. What you're talking about now is eliminating another 12. That parking is essential. It's not just the 20 minutes. You've already got enough traffic coming around. We need the parking for customers, for the employees, for the residents, all of it. Please, I have to close my business to come here on Thursday nights. I teach class tonight. It's already cost me $500 a night every time I come here. It would be great if for once you just said no and put an end to this. You don't have to go to city council. You don't have to get more information. Just say no. Thank you, please.
Thanks for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Amy Moore. I'm the owner of women's consignment boutique, Closet Karma. I'm the second merchant on that northeast corner of San Pablo and Solano. I know my business is somewhat atypical of what's been on the block, but the block is changing. And with the addition of Juanita and Maud at the end of the block, which is packed nearly every evening that they're open, the notion that parking is readily available is just not true. And at the last meeting, it was characterized by AC Transit as a block of low priority for parking. This is not true. This block is busy. I've been open just since the beginning of the year, and I already have regular customers who visit me on a weekly basis, and they are repeatedly having to leave my store to either move their car or then they don't come back again, or they can't find parking. You talk about public safety. I would argue that myself, and I know that Vic's wife, we have both been subject to verbal and more aggressive abuse. There is a repeated presence of seemingly unstable people walking up and down the block shouting obscenities. I, on a Saturday afternoon, had to lock my front door because a man stopped in front of my store and started shouting obscenities at myself and Mr. Silva. And I had women in the store shopping, and I did not feel safe. I'm there often late at night, working. I run the shop by myself. And in the evening, I'm open. I have women who are shopping. So if you're concerned about public safety, please take that into consideration. And I will also support what's been said. We all have regular customers who truly value what we have to offer. We work so hard to keep our businesses going, and I hope that you care more than just about transit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sangeeta Gurcha. I am the local resident of Albany, and I've been living here for 26 years, and we also own the business here. So, in the previous meeting, you guys said that you value public opinion. So we do have the petition from our customers who are local here, and also the business owners. Since you were saying that you wanted to hear from the other business owners too, so. Pretty much like every time we come here, it's all about AC Transit, like what AC Transit wants. I think it's about time that you look into your local businesses and see what they want. I don't know why AC Transit is so important to you as compared to the local businesses. Like our livelihood, all of our livelihood depends on that parking. And I just don't know what else to tell you, because it seems like whatever we say, it just goes in one ear, goes out the other ear. So please say no to whatever you're I don't know what you guys are thinking. Just say no, like Mr. Silva told you. So we have the petition here. You guys can take a look. We can make copies of this. This is local people here who are voicing their opinion, and they don't want the bus stop moved. That's all I have to say. And the other copy we have is all the local businesses that are supporting us on this matter, and they don't want the bus stop moved. So I don't know what more you need to say no to this matter and leave it. I've been living here 26 years, and the bus stop's been there. I haven't seen anybody die. I haven't seen any buses being hit. I don't know what public safety concern you guys are talking about. I really don't know. I went to Albany High here. Okay, that business has been our family for like good since '89. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Public safety. What public safety? My kids go to school here. I don't see any buses hitting anybody. I don't see any cars being hit by anything. So I don't know why you need to kill all the businesses by taking out all the parking just to accommodate AC Transit, for crying out loud. Excuse me, but I'm like fed up with this thing. So please put a stop to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any further public comments on this item? Please. I saw you might have come in late. We are asking that you submit a slip. Yes, after is fine.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Hobbs. I live on Kains Avenue, which is 1 block over from San Pablo. And I would have to say, if you look at the block of between Kains and Marin, there's a lot of empty storefronts there. I've lived here for 7 years, and I think the reason that those storefronts don't get rented, because there's no parking. I think it's a great resource that we have so many businesses on the corner there. The one corner where they have a coffee shop now, they've had a tremendous amount of trouble getting that place to be good, to run and have profit. And then the southeast corner where the bus stop is, they're trying to have a Mexican restaurant there, but they had the nightclub there, and it's been shut down. That place has been empty for 5 years. These businesses are bringing in revenue for the city, and I think you need to think about that. And if you take away the parking, these businesses leave. Other businesses will not want to come in. If they don't have a source of parking, you're going to be relying on people walking in. And where will those people park to walk in? Maybe some of us local residents, but a lot of these people come by cars. I mean, that's our car culture. So that's something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. So the cards are available in the back. Yeah. Any other public comments on this issue tonight? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the commission. Do we have commissioner comments and opinions?
Do we have an inventory of how many, if we were to approve both of the recommendations or both of the suggestions here to move the San Pablo Ave stop and to create the Solano Ave stop, how many parking spaces in net would be lost?
So I don't think there's any net loss on San Pablo, but there would be a loss of 4 parking spaces on Solano in front of Mr. Dewey's, would be the angled parking.
So it's a net loss of 4 parking spaces for the city as a
On
whole.
Solano.
Folks, we've listened to your comments. We're hearing from staff. If there's something significantly different than was said before by staff, I will entertain other comments. Let's hear the questions from the commissioners, and I may give you an opportunity later. Thank you for being cooperative. So that answered your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, do you have any other questions or comments?
Not right now.
Okay. Susan, you're thinking about it.
I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
I guess I do have another question. Do you have the petition in front of you, and can you say what the petition
I
actually
think there were
says?
2 petitions. I heard one with 500 signatures, and we received one with about 19 signatures.
I'm happy to read what,
19 signatures of the businesses who signed it.
Right, and there was one with 500 signatures?
the customers.
Could we see that?
500 is our customer who are
Okay, why don't you hand that to Harry?
Okay.
Harry, why don't you read the statement at the top?
We need your help. AC Transit and City of Albany is planning on moving the bus stop in front of Max's Liquors, 865 San Pablo Avenue, Albany, and making a bulb out. This would take out all the 20-minute parking in front of Max's Liquors, which would hurt our business tremendously. Our customers would have no parking. We ask for all the Albany residents and our customers to help us in this situation by signing this petition and keep the bus stop from moving in front of Max's. Thank you.
And we've already stipulated that there are plenty of signatures there. So I believe there could be 500, I'm sorry.
So people are signing that there'd be no parking, there'd be no 20-minute parking spaces. That's what it says.
It says that.
It says our customers would have no
Supposed to have
parking.
No parking.
Yeah.
And there'd be no 20-minute spaces. Doesn't say they'll be relocated. So
Right.
if we're worried about accuracy, as was pointed out to us, that doesn't sound accurate either.
Okay.
Just to point out, be clear.
Accuracy.
What we calculated, basically, you do have the 3 parking spaces on the north side. With the removal on the south side, there would be about 66 feet that could be converted to green zone parking. So that's where you lose 3 on the north side, you would gain 3 on the south side.
And
I'll
then
make
3.
one correction to that. Just right
Yeah.
at the intersection, we'll have a small segment of red zone right at the crosswalk. So depending, none of these are marked spaces, so it's depending on the size of the car.
So there may be a loss of
Maybe
one
we'll
space
also
along
one if
San
you take
Pablo.
the entire, from one end of San Pablo to the other. But what's important is what we're talking about doing, and again, we can change the types of parking, but there would be an equivalent green zone shifted up from where it is today, shifted up
Right.
80 feet.
Right.
Correct.
And the plan that you've drawn actually shows more green parking spaces along San Pablo in the new configuration than there were in the old one, right? They're just not in the same place.
That's right.
Okay.
So could I say that staff believes that there may be approximately 4 spaces lost on Solano and potentially 1 overall on San Pablo? But other than that, it would be a conversion of and shifting of parking.
Right.
Okay.
And what would be, now I don't know if this is a benefit to some of the customers of the liquor store and the other businesses, but right now, for a potential customer who's going north on San Pablo who would normally like to make a right turn onto to Solano and continue their travels, they would now have more green zones to stop. They could cross the Solano at the intersection, go to visit the business, come back down, and then continue on their way on Solano Avenue. So it's a different type. It may be that most, if they're, I don't know if it serves their customers or not, but the intent was not to take away green parking spaces from this general intersection. But in order to make the bus stop work safely, they do have to be moved around.
All right, so I think we can safely say that the location of the parking spaces would be less convenient for the businesses north of Solano. The number of parking spaces will be the same. So there is a trade-off. I think we recognize that.
Sir, I hope to give you an opportunity later, but if you could cooperate for now, thank you. It's our turn to speak. Thank you.
And the business on Solano is already talking about doing a parklet which would eliminate those far parking spaces regardless what the bus stop does. So that net change would happen anyway. I think we're certainly flexible to, the number of green spaces versus the number of 90-minute spaces. If the number of spaces is the same, we can certainly have a conversation around how do we designate those spaces.
So I'm a little puzzled by the sense that there's this general consensus among the businesses in the neighborhood that this change would harm them. I can understand why the change would harm Max's Liquors. I'm a little less certain about why it would harm the glass store, but if there are other stores on that block, it doesn't seem that this change would help or harm them. It would just be a little bit different. Does anyone else have any thoughts about that? And
I mean, what we've heard is that people would have to walk farther to make deliveries to those stores versus parking right in front of them.
To which stores, though?
Well, the ones closest to the intersection. I suppose you're right. The ones farther from the intersection would have closer deliveries. It's a question of what merchandise they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And whether they use hand trucks to move things.
Yeah. I do think of all the problems that have been described, maybe the issues about loading zone seem the most problematic because customers being able to walk maybe an extra 50 feet from the new parking space to the store instead of from the old parking space to the store sounds to me like a fairly small problem, certainly a lot smaller than asking bus passengers to walk an extra block. But loading is more complicated, and I don't exactly understand when loading happens, where it happens, who needs it, how it can be accommodated in the new configuration. If it's true that the current green zone has an additional function beyond serving customers, I think the plan shown by staff does everything it can to accommodate the customers.
But the current green zone does not have a loading.
It doesn't, but it
aspect to
functions as a loading zone during less busy hours, I think is what we're being
So
shown.
if all three spaces are empty, a truck can park there to operate.
Yeah.
But that just shifts up the block.
Right.
So
In
is
the
it-
current, in this design, it just.
So during those same not-so-busy hours, the farther north green zone could function as a loading zone just as well as,
Right. So with the larger size truck deliveries, as it stands now, the back end of the truck, if it's a rear load truck, is at the crosswalk versus if it were at the green zones further up the block, it would essentially be at the front of where the current green zone is.
So just as we aren't really changing the number of parking spaces for customers very much, we also aren't changing the amount of space available for loading zone very much.
But it would shift.
It would just move to a place that's less convenient for some merchants and possibly more convenient for others.
If I may give you one piece of information, and perhaps you'll get public comment on this too. I know that the gentleman who runs the stained glass shop, they deal with particularly heavy items with customers. And so that's a real issue for them, is how far do they have to carry these things. My experience with UPS or FedEx or some of the professionally managed delivery trucks, they will park wherever they feel like it, and they'll stop in the middle of the lane or in the center divide or whatever.
Or a bus stop?
Or a bus stop, and they'll just do it. But at least they're fast about it, and so and they don't gripe about it much. They just make their delivery and move on.
As far as the glass store, I think last time we looked at some dimensions and found that in the current setup, the green zone extends into about half of the frontage of the glass store. And in the proposed configuration, the green zone would be north of there, but it would still, the south end of the green zone would still be very close to the glass store, just not directly in front of it. It would be maybe one car length in front of it. Does that sound right from what we saw last time?
Within 20 or 30, 40 feet, something in that range, it wouldn't be, it's all relative, and I suppose, but it's not an extended walk to get to the new green zone.
Okay. Susan?
So thinking about this, just experience on this commission, and what it means to be in Albany as a person who's lived here for like 30 years. I think of Albany as, I come from Atlanta, where it's all suburban, and it's all about parking. You have to get around in a car to do anything. But even when you get around in a car in Atlanta to do anything, you have to walk a long way because your parking lots are big. But it's a walking city, I think. It's also a bus city. Lots of bus stops, lots of bus traffic, lots of people coming in and out. And then it's also a city with incredible shops that I love to go to on foot most of the time. Or if I know that I need to go downtown, I know I need to walk. So and also when it was brought up that not many folks are here talking for AC Transit, I am a commuter that goes on the bus. We have lots of people coming through our town on buses, lots of people that I would argue are customers too of these very shops. They don't attend this meeting, but a lot of people don't attend this meeting. Usually who we see at this meeting are people that are concerned about their parking, traffic on their street, or speed, which we're all concerned about. The city is hit by that across the city. So we are here to balance out all of those needs. And just like a homeowner in this city, you know, when I commute into San Francisco, nobody in San Francisco thinks of their parking in front of their house as theirs. Nobody. They don't. And unfortunately, I don't think that business owners can think of it that way either. I think we've been trying to work around this. We know that we've had AC Transit explain the best practices for large traffic streets, and it's not what we have. It's not the way it's set up right now. And we suffer, a lot of people in the city suffer, a lot of people going through the city suffer from lots of traffic congestion in this area. So I am sensitive to the fact that Albany is an incredible town where individual business owners are really important to that. And I make it a point to walk and attend those businesses. But I think it's really, really important for us to think about all the voices that don't show up here. And that's what we've been doing on this project for a long time. I think it's amazing that we haven't really lost much parking on San Pablo to do this. I think that's pretty amazing that we could do that. And I also think it's kind of amazing that we have a business owner that wants a bus stop in front of their, sees the opportunity of bringing traffic in the area on Solano. So that's kind of my observation on this topic. right now.
Okay. I want to make a couple comments, and then I think I'd like to open it up to the public for comments on delivery specifically. Were there anything else that we talked about that the public didn't get a chance to talk about besides the delivery issue that you think I should open it up for? No. Okay. Thanks everyone for your comments, and I agree with what's been set up here on the commission, and I especially appreciate your comments, Susan, about looking out for the greater good. When we talk about the transit riders, we're talking about a lot of people who are our neighbors. I happen to be a transit rider part of the time, not a great deal of my time, but I was also surprised to hear comments about safety in the area. I never heard this project proposed as a solution to a safety issue. I think we could address that separately, and I'd be interested in that. I would actually say that moving a bus stop to the far side would bring more people, and some riders are regular commuters, and I pass these people walking on San Pablo on a regular basis, and I think some of those people could contribute to the safety of the area. That's just my opinion. And let's look at the safety issue separately. We talked about the number of spaces. So efficacy or efficiency of the intersection and the bus service, I think, is really what we're aiming to get here. We're having a low number of spaces lost, and in fact, a survey has been done that says that more than 40% of the people on the lower Solano area arrive there under their own power and not via car. So I think we have to be aware of the larger population. The first speaker tonight said that we were only hearing viewpoints about opposing the movement of the stop, and actually that's not true. We did hear last time from a bus rider, and so I just want to make that comment. Before we talk about what we're gonna do about this issue, I do want to open up for possibility of comments again for just 2 minutes. We talked briefly before, and I should say that we talked briefly before about taking some of the parking spaces on Solano and possibly making that into a delivery or a commercial striped area. And staff, you didn't come back with that. There wasn't much comment on that last time.
Well, what we observed is there a lot of people who are using that right turn? I think what you're referring to is the right turn lane.
Actually,
if we understood that correctly.
I had in mind that maybe the last few parking spaces going west.
So east of the right turn lane?
East of the right turn lane, potentially, could be converted to commercial spaces, which would provide...
Or commercial hours?
You know, part-time commercial.
Yeah.
So the morning peak, there was 153 right turns on westbound Solano to northbound San Pablo.
Right, so I'm not advocating eliminating the right-hand turn lane. I'm advocating considering what would happen if you changed parking spaces to commercial loading zone for both rideshare deliveries and then after hours, presumably regular parking.
Right. We would have no objection to any mix of green, yellow, and 90-minute. And we can experiment with that if we wanted to and see how it's used, or do some further analysis to try to anticipate how it would be used. No problem at all with either one of those approaches.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think in particular if there's a time of day when there's a lot of deliveries happening but not a lot of customer activity, maybe in the mornings. I don't know the patterns of usage that much, but maybe the merchants do. When is there a time that it'd be useful to convert some customer spaces into temporary commercial loading spaces.
All right, so that issue didn't get addressed in public comment, so I'd like to open it back up to individuals who wish to speak for up to 2 minutes on, mostly on delivery zone issues. Please, come on up.
James Silva, Avalon Glassworks. I think staff is unfamiliar with the area to the point that the numbers that we're talking about and the impacts on parking, I don't believe staff's information. The current location on that side of San Pablo, on the north side, the space that they're talking about is routinely occupied by 6 cars. That first 80 feet is routinely 6 cars. There are 3 cars that fit into the green zone, and then there are room for 2.5 spaces in front of that. So what you're losing is 6 spaces there. By shifting the green zone, the 20-minute zone further up, it impacts my customers, the customers that I'm doing custom work for. It impacts my ability to load or unload stuff. Not just a client pulling in to drop something off, but these are large installs. It's not 20 minutes, it's a half an hour, 45 minutes to load up a truck to go put a window in. And by moving the 20-minute zones further down the road, you're eliminating 90-minute zones. Now that entire block is full Saturday from 8:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Every spot is taken. On Saturday, on Sunday, if you put a bus stop there, it's going to have a huge impact on all of the businesses on that block. There's a reason that block has businesses. If you move them across the street, a block is a mile when it comes to customers. They just don't do that. Now, the theater may have some customers use that parking, but my customers aren't. The liquor store is not. It's going to have a huge detrimental impact just moving it across the street. And that's sort of the whole point. What you've also missed is there's a tree there. There literally is a tree right where the front door of the bus is. You'd have to take a tree out to have a bus stop in front of my shop, which is where they're talking about putting it. There's a tree.
So, sir, you have no opinion on having a loading zone on Solano?
Well, staff already said that there's so much traffic that having semis or bigger trucks or making me walk around the block with a 5-foot window, it just doesn't work. We need the proximity. That's sort of.
So about that loading and unloading issue, so we basically buy the merchandise for our store like pretty much 2 or 3 times a week. And as a team of husband and wife, we park the car in the 20-minute zone because we have a whole car full of like heavy merchandise, heavy glass bottles, liquor, beer, wine, everything pretty much that we unload. And he unloads, I pick it up, I take it inside. And sometimes we get deliveries. We get, 20, the big, what do you call them? The big wheelers,
Semi-trucks?
18-wheelers, I want to say. We got those. Sometimes we got back-to-back deliveries. Sometimes we got like 500 cases, which is not going to unload in 5 minutes. So it could take up to anywhere because they have to unload it, which usually takes about half an hour, more than maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. Then we have to count everything that they bring in, and then they go back if there's something. So it can take anywhere from hour to like hour, 15 minutes, loading, unloading. If you put a bus stop right there, and if I got like 2 deliveries, which I sometimes do because we order stuff and we got like 2 trucks, standing there, they're not gonna, if there's, most of the time there's not even any parking. Like I said last time, I have to call the parking enforcement so many times because all the parking is taken away. Now you'd put a bus stop right there, and then I get my 2 18-wheelers that are standing there, they're loading, unloading. I got like maybe 3 deliveries sometimes, in a day. Like it can be back to back, it can be spaced out. I don't know how you're solving any problem by moving the bus stop because it's gonna just make the congestion even worse. I mean, I invite you guys, if you guys live here locally, come to the store, watch how the whole day goes instead of, just basing a study on one day of, like you guys did last time on month of February, one day the study was done and you came to the conclusion, X, Y, and Z. That's not true. We are there from 8:30 in the morning. My business is open till 2 o'clock in the morning. So we are there good like 16, 17 hours. So I know how the traffic flows. I probably know more than any of you guys do. So if you, I invite you, please come to the store, watch how the flow goes, be there when I get my deliveries and see how things are. You guys are not solving anything. There's probably gonna be the situation worse than you can ever imagine. Thank you for your time.
If I could ask a question?
Please.
How do you get the green zone empty for the trucks to park? How long do they have to wait?
Mostly the green zone, mostly they come in the mornings. So because the green zone is available in the mornings, they don't they don't double park. They just stand right there, they unload, then they leave. The green zone is not only used by my businesses, they're used by businesses right on Solano too, the restaurants and everything. But if you put a bus stop right there, and like I said, I don't know, you live here in Albany?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay, then definitely. So be there, watch how the flow goes. They usually use the 20-minute zone. They park right there, so they are not double parked.
I understand. I was just, we heard that the green zone is always full.
It is mostly full.
This is today's picture I took.
Sure, so they double park.
One truck is delivering, the other truck is also coming into
Sure.
my store for delivery. So this is
Everything that we are saying, I'm not just making it up. You know what I mean? Like, so.
I understand. I'm just trying to get the clarity of the two different versions that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I want to understand how they come together. You're telling me it's less crowded in the morning? That's acceptable.
It is less crowded in the morning, but like I said, my deliveries are not predictable. I don't know when they're going to come, but you'll see for yourself. Please come and watch it.
We do. I make that left turn all the time. I'm past there all the time. So we do see it. We all live in the community. That's how we're eligible to serve on this commission.
Okay. Any other comments? It sounds like there isn't a general interest in the loading zone on Solano from the merchants.
That's something that we can revisit later if the merchants
Right.
come to you about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's table that for now.
I mean, just to close that out a little bit, looking at the numbers, if there were 75 cars per hour in the morning making that right turn from Solano onto San Pablo, but both between 8 and 9 and 9 to 10, so each hour there's 75 cars, that's a little over 1 per minute. Adding that to the through lane, if that were a morning loading zone, would seem to have very little impact. The number goes up to 2 cars per minute on average midday, so a little more significant impact on the through traffic lane. But again, 2 cars is not a huge deal. So if and when there was interest in considering a loading zone there, I think it would generally be okay, although, again, we'd want to take a more thorough look at it. Yes, this is a snapshot, that's fine. We can get more data. So leaving that one aside, I did take a look at the businesses that were listed here as opposed. I looked twice. I didn't see Subway sandwiches on there, which is where, way back when we had the same opposition from them that we were going to put them out of business if we moved the bus stop to the far side southbound. They seem to be doing fine. And they didn't sign this petition, although others in the area did. I did see JV Liquors listed on there up at the corner of Washington and San Pablo, which was another location that was suggested to relocate the bus stop. So we kind of be replicating the same problem, moving it north. We'd be giving bus passengers a longer distance to walk. So I appreciate the attempt to be creative, but it would separate the bus transfers. It would largely be facing similar problems there. And we know with the businesses there, they also are quite busy and use that parking. And looking at the complete streets design for that intersection, we've grappled with that same issue of parking and where we can put the treatments and facilities that are there. In terms of again, are we looking out for the businesses? Are we looking out for AC Transit? Again, it's not just businesses and AC Transit, it's businesses and their customers and AC Transit and their customers. So this is all about customers who are largely residents of the community on both sides of this equation, and we're trying to serve them both. So I do think that we have to be at least honest about that it's not just, an agency out there versus the community. It is the community on all sides of this equation, and we're not ignoring that. I think that is important. So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Do we have any city regulations on delivery, or, I mean, I worked for chain restaurants where we had to honor all kinds of city requirements on deliveries. Do we have any in Albany?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I think they're just standard vehicle code things, really not supposed to block lanes and so forth.
Many cities have
Parking red zones,
hours.
not in front of hydrants. People do it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, many cities, small cities have hour windows and things like that, but it's good that we don't. I mean, it's hard to
If we
manage.
wanted to do that, we could try to do that, as long as we set the hours at times when we have parking enforcement people on duty.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to follow up on Fareed's observations about this idea of supporting businesses versus AC transit. And I think we've heard that tonight, but I want to challenge it a little bit. I think there are a couple of businesses that are directly affected by this move. I think the owners of the liquor store have made a pretty strong case that their business model will be somewhat disrupted by making the change. I think the owner of the glass store has made a little bit of a case that some of his customers may be inconvenienced a little bit. I think the other businesses in the neighborhood won't really be harmed by making this change, and it sort of surprises me that a lot of them have spoken up against it, and I can chalk that up to a couple of things. One is fear of change, one is solidarity with their neighbor businesses, which I very much appreciate that the community wants to stand together. On the other hand, if we really look at the benefits and the drawbacks of making the change, I think we have to be clear-eyed about what the drawbacks are, and people who come to speak about how difficult it is to be a business in Albany because of problems with crazy people or problems with customers not showing up because they think it's too hard to park. Those are real problems and challenges that people live with, but they're not directly connected to the change that we're talking about. And I don't want it to be seen that approving this change is taking a stand against the businesses. I think several of the businesses who seem to be speaking up against it are just not, it's not really this that they're speaking up against. And as far as I can tell, I think there's a perception that somehow something is going wrong, but it's not specifically about the location of the bus stop, as far as I can tell. And I don't know what it is, and I wish that we could do more to try to resolve whatever challenges people have about personal safety and parking and everything. And I do want to suggest once again that the city of Albany has always taken a stand in its public policy that is the most extreme possible stand in favor of encouraging people to use their cars more than necessary to drive to stores and to use the parking spaces on the street as much as possible. And that's a choice, and it's a reasonable choice in some cases. I think as long as the amount of street parking is excessive, that can be a good choice, that you might as well get it used. If nobody's going to use it, let's do everything we can to encourage people to use it. On the other hand, if it really does start to be to the point where that street parking is becoming fully used for the first time in Albany's history, that that would be an interesting transition point to say, let's start to manage it. Let's start to arrange it so that the people who actually want a particular parking space more can get that space. And the people who are willing to walk a little bit farther can walk a little bit farther. And I think many of you know what I'm talking about. If I say it out loud, people will start screaming and say, we absolutely don't want that. It's the thing that will drive all our customers away. So I don't think the business community here is ready to say parking in Albany is full and we should start managing it better, namely with parking meters, which is the way you manage parking when it gets full. I don't think the business community here really wants to make that transition, but every once in a while we do hear from businesses that parking is full and it's a problem for their customers. And I just want to remind everybody that that's a known problem in cities and there's a known solution, and we're ready to start considering it whenever you are. So
I think I'm going to comment. Harry, I started out really strongly with you on there, and then you actually started guessing about what the people who spoke were thinking, and I can't go that far. I understand that there's a lot of frustration. I think there's some what I think is a very strong reaction to this plan, and I don't want to discount that at all. And I won't guess what people are thinking other than what they've said, and I think that's really important. The truth is, this is a change, and we can all have different opinions about the change. And we will make some recommendation to City Council tonight. They will take that up, hopefully, in the near future. I think we can have differences of opinion, but I'm not going to guess what people's thoughts are.
maybe I should follow up. If I did that, I apologize for putting words in anybody's mouth. I'm mostly reacting to the fact that we hear more negative language around this change than we hear specific problems that people expect it will lead to. And that leaves me in the position of having to make some guesses.
Okay.
I should probably do quietly instead of out loud. But I would encourage everybody who speaks to any commission or city council to try to be specific about the project that's being considered, how it will specifically help or harm you. And when we hear about the various problems that people have, it can distract from the issue and can leave us in the position of thinking, well, we're hearing about someone who's unhappy and we don't know exactly why. And that's a challenge for us.
Oh.
Let me just say, I think, thank you for your clarification, Harry, and I think we should kind of move on, unless you have something specific.
I do, and I'll move it to another item as well, but I do want to say I'm taking all the comments at face value. I think I understand what people are saying, what they are anticipating will be the results of the actions, and I trust that everyone who's spoken truly believes what they say. And I have no reason to doubt that at all. Whether or not we agree on the accuracy of an observation or what's likely to happen, each of us has our own experiences that lead us to draw those conclusions. So I fully respect that. And so I really do try to understand exactly what the concerns are. And I'm not going to pretend that it's going to be necessarily wonderful. There will be a change. I accept that. If the bus stop moves, some things are going to change. Some will be, maybe it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Maybe it is less convenient. Maybe it's just disruptive, and then it settles down. And all of us can project and guess, et cetera. But to get to something specific that was mentioned, because I am paying attention, I'm trying to anyway, the location of the tree relative to the door of the bus. So if the tree is 65 feet from the corner and the bus is like 60 feet long, but it stops 5 feet past the crosswalk, so the door is maybe just behind the tree, that maybe works out if the bus stops in the right spot and there's no bus bulb. If we have a bus bulb, now we have 8 feet of sidewalk in front of the tree that presumably addresses that. So I'm hearing what the concern is, and I think that the proposal includes the solution to it in terms of not conflicting with the tree.
Yeah.
So in other words,
But not having a bus bulb.
well, if there's not a bus bulb, I think the bus could just fit, if my dimensions are correct, which AC Transit seems to be confirming. But I also believe that we are talking about a bus bulb, in which case the concern about obstacles on the sidewalk kind of becomes moot, because now we have a fresh, clear sidewalk area.
Okay, well, let's stop there for a sec and check in with staff.
So is that correct? Or
We're not anticipating a bus bulb. We could do one if the commission wanted to recommend that. It has impacts possibly on drainage.
okay, that's
So what we would think is that the stop, I'm not sure how clear it is on the screen, but you can see the end of the green zone.
correct.
And I would think a bus would be able to, Catherine, you can get up and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a bus can unload, maybe that little no parking sign or whatever that little sign is needs to move.
Right, because the dimensions, again, of 80-foot bus stop, the 15 feet in the front is maneuvering room for the bus to pull out. If the bus stops at the 65-foot mark, the windscreen of the bus is parallel to the tree, but if the door is back a couple feet, maybe we're okay. Definitely worth kind of taking a close look at, because it's a good point that if we were to conflict, that would be a big problem.
Yes, Reed, that is correct. Our bus will actually be just right before the,
Can you bring the microphone up to your mouth?
yes,
Thank you.
sorry. Yes, our bus will stop right before the tree.
Okay.
And so we'd actually place the pole maybe about like 18 inches from the tree landscaping. And our buses stop at the pole, and then we have an extra foot for our passengers to unload, ADA accessible, and then it goes from the foot to 24 feet for
Okay.
our doors to clear.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
All right. Are you, 15 seconds? No, just wait till you get to the microphone. Okay, go.
I was under the impression that we were also talking about 60-foot buses, the extra long ones that we're going to use this, so that they're not going to be stopping before the tree. The tree is at 64 feet. If they stop before the tree, now you're back on the corner. So they were talking about a long bus using this stop as well, not just the 40-footers.
Understood. And that's where, if the tree is 64, 65 feet from the curb, give or take, and the bus is 60 feet, the bus does fit without the back end hanging into the crosswalk. That's exactly the point we wanted to confirm. And I think we're confirmed on that, and we can certainly double check before anything moves.
We'll double check to make sure, we'll double check to make sure we can make this work for all the buses without removing the tree. And we'll come back to you if that doesn't work.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So staff will deal with that issue. So City Council has asked that we not only provide them with a recommendation, but provide them with options. So as you think about what we might recommend to the council, please think about how we could provide them with some leeway and suggestions for ways to, options within the recommendation. Is there any more discussion on this? Or do we want to start thinking about a recommendation? Or not?
Well, for the sake of, if we're going to
Genesexes.
approve the relocation of the bus stop, what would it look like? I would move that that would include the far side bus stop on San Pablo, stopping just before the tree, according to the dimensions we've been given.
So I think we're going to leave the tree out, and staff will come back if
That's
it's an
fine.
issue. Is
So,
that okay?
Yeah, so as drawn up in the proposal,
Far side stop on
far
San
side
Pablo.
stop on San Pablo works with the shifting of the green zones to in front of the red zone. On Solano, I would support the near side bus stop in the lane with a bus bulb or parklet.
Bulb or parklet.
Right.
Got it.
I mean, the parklet
And maybe
certainly would be
transitioning
preferable.
from one to the other, whatever works out.
Right.
Not
Right.
important
So
for us.
if the timing, but I think it's important that, I mean, we don't, let me clarify. If in the short term, there's not time to build the bulb or the parklet, the bus would have to stop all the way at the curb, which I don't like because it would impact parking more. But the ultimate configuration should be an in-lane stop at a bus bulb or parklet
Before Kains.
before Kains.
Yeah.
Because I think that has the best sight lines for vehicles and pedestrians.
So if we wanted to offer the city council various options, would you suggest that Solano bus stop be recommended to be in lane, but another option is to pull it?
The other option would be to
curb?
park all the way up against the curb.
Is that the kind of the second best?
Well,
Well, that
it's
would take
really
out
the
more
only,
parking.
without physical change to the street, it's the only option. For the passengers to load and unload from the bus has to be against a curb. I assume it's AC Transit policy, you don't load passengers from the street.
And I'm just responding to
Right.
Ken's recommendation that
So that could be a possibility.
we offer more than one option, and so
Right,
if
so
the
so
one
that
you
would
just
be the option,
described
all
would
the way at
be-
the curb or at a bulb.
Okay.
Are there ever any parking spots that can be labeled, you may be blocked by a bus?
Well-
I mean, has that ever happened? Like you can park here, but, yeah.
And I'm thinking this in the context of sometimes buses can stop blocking a driveway. You could just as well stop and block a parking space, assuming a bus bulb brought the passengers out to the door of the bus. So the back end of the bus, in that case, might still overhang a parking space. I don't think that's the geometry we're dealing with here. But yes, it is possible for that to happen. It just doesn't fit this particular configuration.
That's right. A 60-foot bus has two doors, right? Correct?
Right. Well, actually, as I think about it, on Solano, yes, that could be exactly what happens.
Yeah,
Not on San Pablo.
yeah.
On Solano, the biggest buses we'll have are the MCIs, the Transbay, which are 45 feet. So we wouldn't have 60-footers on Solano.
Oh, so does that reduce? Yeah, okay.
And those have front door loading and a
And
side door.
So the MCIs is just front door loading,
okay.
but the 40-footers, it's the 24 feet range that I mentioned before.
But the 18, which is a smaller bus, does have two doors, yes?
Yes, yes. And the clearance for the two doors on the 40-footer is 24 feet.
Okay.
Okay.
So between the existing bulb out and convert two parking spaces to a loading area / parklet, I think we would have the 24 feet potentially.
And then it might,
I'm into letting
Let
staff
them
figure
design
out.
it, yeah.
but that
I think
could
we're getting a
be,
little too
It
far
sounds
into the
feasible.
details,
that
yes.
that could be the option that you speak of?
Well, Harry was suggesting, can we go back to the drawing? Please.
So to Harry's point, the options on Solano are near side stop at a bus bulb
Bus bulb
or a parklet
or a parklet,
or all the way over at the curb.
or right here in this area and eliminating most of the parking.
Yes.
For
Which is
both
why-
pulling in,
Yeah,
pulling adjacent, and then pulling out.
which is why I really don't like the curbside option. But if we
So it was
want
my assumption that
alternatives-
these were the spaces here that were to be eliminated.
Yes.
Yeah, so that we would not be putting vehicles in a position where they would be held in by a bus unloading a handicapped passenger.
No, the first
Okay.
parallel parking space there might have difficulty getting out. Well, they couldn't get around the bus anyway, so they're going to have to wait.
But there's trapped and then there's trapped. And I'm not into creating a space that would be directly back into a bus.
No. Trap for a few
various
seconds is not a big deal. And yes, not backing directly into a bus is great, especially if there's passengers getting off the bus. There are lots of reasons not to do that.
I think we're getting into a little too far into the design details at this time. I don't think we quite have the details to work with, but yes, thank you for working out those details.
Before
I just
we-
don't think we want to put them in our proposal.
No.
Before we get too far into creating the verbiage of our proposal, I wanted to point out that the agenda tonight has some verbiage in it already as a recommended action, and we could take that as a starting point. Instead of restating it, we could make reference to that, maybe simplify.
Great. While people are looking at that, Susan, you had some comments.
Uh-oh.
Have we moved beyond that?
Yeah. I
Okay,
think so.
fair enough. I just didn't want your comments to get left out if you still had them.
Oh, no, I do recall. So you had initially asked for including options, and one of the things that staff has said several times, and I agree with, is that the actual paint, the designation of the parking spaces that are either released from, south on San Pablo or moved, adjusted on north of San Pablo, I think.
North of Solano on San Pablo?
Exactly. Any of those, even including around the corner, like we were talking about for possible loading, I think that needs to be included in the options that we're looking into. We can look into all of that that makes the flow better and helps the businesses in the area, depending on need.
So, in other words, the question of whether it's green zone or 90-minute zone or loading zone should be open for discussion going forward.
Right.
And I agree.
Another option might be that part or all of this could be done on an interim basis to see if it actually works. That wouldn't be my first recommendation, but I think
that would get confusing for the bus people, probably. I don't know, maybe not.
as a bus rider, there are notices all the time of
That's
changed
true.
routes.
That's true.
I actually find that quite common
That's true.
And the relocation on San Pablo is really,
across the
it's paint and
intersection.
signs,
Yeah.
not hard to do
Right.
as a trial, and if it fails, you undo it, versus the, how we do the loading on Solano. If we don't do it curbside, that requires some substantive construction. Not major, but, parklet.
I would actually suggest that we make a fairly straightforward recommendation and offer the far side move on San Pablo as a potential for a trial, if City Council wanted to modify.
With or without moving the stop around the corner onto Solano as well.
I guess what I'm saying, I'll try and be more clear. I think I'm looking for a recommendation to council that would say we would like to move the bus stop on San Pablo to the far side, move the 18 and G stop around the corner, what do we call that? Near side at Solano and Kains. And that if the city council is looking for options, one would be to do the far side stop on San Pablo as a trial.
Right.
I don't think moving only one makes sense.
But if one is a trial and the trial is ultimately reversed,
Then you'd have to reverse both.
then you'd have to reverse both.
Yeah. So I guess the whole thing would have to be a trial then, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Good point.
And I think that's fine to make it something that is a trial by virtue of setting a time period to return to council after implementation with an evaluation, which gives council the opportunity to then make a determination on whether to continue.
And how would you measure the success?
Becomes,
We have a comment from AC Transit.
Hi, I think it's a good idea to do a trial in these sort of, politically big events. But I will note that if, as a trial, we probably won't have the funding to do a bus bulb or parklet. And in that event, our buses will be pulling into the bay, and the length of this bay, it won't give us a good reading in terms of data, because whenever we pull into the bay, our buses take longer to exit. And so in regards to that, it wouldn't give a full picture or scope of the positives of the relocation and splitting of the stops.
Is it correct that it would accurately reflect the positives of the flow along San Pablo, but not the positives of what could happen on Solano?
I would say that's fairly correct, yeah.
Okay.
so I'm going to correct one of the things we just said a minute ago in terms of if we undid one, we have to undo both. And I do think that moving the stop around the corner onto Solano can happen independently of moving the stop on San Pablo to the far side.
Okay.
So if we were to do a trial of both, we could undo just the one on San Pablo. And if that makes it more viable for AC Transit to commit the funds towards a bus bulb or parklet, I think that's something the city could more easily commit to in the long term.
And that would also make a lot of sense in terms of alleviating some of the buses getting stacked at the near side on San Pablo. So moving it onto Solano could help.
So if we ended up in a configuration where the 72 still stops on the south side of Solano, but the 18 and the G stop around the corner on Solano,
If it reverted back
that would
to
be
that,
workable.
I mean,
Yeah, if we reverted the 72 stop, but kept the new stop for the 18 and the G, that's a configuration that AC Transit can support, can live with.
We live with worse.
Okay.
But it would not be a recommendation, especially since
Yeah.
we are testing out a safer move to move back to,
Right. I just want to make sure it wouldn't.
What would AC Transit look for as a success versus not success?
We
in
would
a move
look-
like that. What would you be measuring?
So we would check on ridership as always to make sure that hasn't changed. We'd also look at dwell time at the stop and travel time throughout the corridor to kind of gauge the effect of congestion. And we would also probably send out surveys because as the rider experience, we'd like to find out more.
Okay, so a couple things. One, I would suggest AC Transit, before this goes to council, come back to staff with information on those measures you just talked about and how long you would require for it to reach equilibrium to have stable data. Doing it the week after the change is gonna
No.
be much convoluted. The other is, as I pondered and based on what you were saying, while physically and geometrically that configuration of a relocated stop on Solano but restore the 72 stop on San Pablo works, the maneuvering is troubling to me. And I think AC Transit should also comment to staff about the prospect of whether AC Transit operations supports the 18 turning around a stopped 72 bus,
Yeah.
because that worries me.
No, we would not. So I guess in terms of loading, it would be a bit alleviated, but in terms of bus stacking, just due to traffic,
It wouldn't.
it wouldn't change.
Because I can't imagine that the 18 wouldn't have to just wait until the 72 moved in order to make that right turn.
Yeah, the only upside I would see is if the 18 was unloading a wheelchair in the current event at San Pablo, then the 72s will stack up behind. But if the 18 is in the first position, free to turn, then,
It's,
so in particular events, it can alleviate the traffic.
I think maybe what we're most concerned about is if we ended up in that hybrid configuration, is there any way in which AC Transit would feel that the situation is worse than it is right now? And if it's not, if it's, at least as good and maybe a little bit better in some ways, then I think we can live with that as a fallback, not AC Transit's ideal
'cause what I
outcome,
just
but
heard-
at least a fallback that we can recommend to City Council as an option.
I think, yeah, based on what we just heard, it's sort of 50-50 which bus shows up first. If the 18 shows up first, it's clear and the 72 gets the benefit of not having to wait. If the 72 arrives first, the 18 is going to have to wait just like it does today.
Just like it
So
does
in one scenario, it's no worse. In the other, it's better, but we're not getting the full benefit to the 18.
Okay, then, as long as we're certain of that, then I think the hybrid fallback possibility is something we can at least propose to City Council.
I will also say that the 72s are more frequent than the 18 and Gs. So it's not a 50-50 split, but in terms for just
Gotcha.
off the top.
But at least it's no worse than what we have today. That's,
Hopefully not.
okay.
Yeah. And I'm daydreaming about rerouting the 18 so it comes back via Jackson and Solano, but that's probably beyond the scope of what we're dealing with this evening.
If I may, just to help the commission, I think the council's direction to explore options was a generic direction, and this may not be a situation where there's a good option. It might just be one or the other. So if you have an option you'd like the council to consider, I think that's appropriate, but you don't have to create an option where there really isn't a good one.
So just to move us along, because I think all the options that we've talked about basically build off of what's in the staff report, I'm going to move the staff recommendation, which is that we recommend to the City Council that staff be directed to improve the encroachment permit application from AC Transit to relocate the AC Transit bus stop at the southeast corner of San Pablo Avenue to the northeast corner of San Pablo Avenue and create a new stop at the southwest corner of Solano Avenue and Kains Avenue with consideration to the alternatives that have been discussed.
And can I say, would it be
Yes.
appropriate to say that the commission favors the near side solution on Solano?
Yes, because as I read it, it said the southwest corner of Solano and Kains, so that's the near side.
Would it be appropriate to add that the commission recommends a bus bulb out or parklet?
I think so. As a preferred alternative, yes. On Solano, the commission recommends the stop be at a bus bulb or parklet.
And do we
Is this
want,
clear that it's an in-lane?
An in-lane bus stop at a bus
Yeah.
bulb or parklet. Thank you.
That was important.
That is very
Okay.
important, yes.
Be clear?
and
Yes.
does the commission want to add any language to the motion about the possibility of considering the San Pablo change as a trial?
Yes. Do you have a suggestion how we would word that? Or is that something staff can flesh out?
I think I like the idea, and fleshing out the details of it we should probably do that with.
Okay,
Catherine.
I will say that falls under the category of alternatives discussed.
Okay.
So that's your motion.
Yes.
Is somebody prepared to second that?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any further discussion among the commissioners? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The recommendation to the City Council passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's input. Oh, yeah, we want to make sure we get, yeah.
And do they need the
yeah, here.
merchant petition back too?
There's one more. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to item number 6.4 on our agenda, the report on the capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2017 to 2018 through 21-22. And presumably the council took action on this on Monday night.
Yes, so the council did take action on the plan Monday night, and so this is just an update on where we are, what projects are in the plan, and in particular, some of the discussions we've had internally in terms of what grants we're looking for, particularly around transportation-related projects. And we have Robert Gonzalez, our relatively new CIP manager, who did all the heavy lifting on this, who's going to sort of walk us through some of the key aspects of the plan.
So, good evening. As part of the agenda, there was a link that provided you access to the CIP online. It's about 94 pages, so we did not provide printouts of the whole document. If you're interested in that, we can certainly provide you a full copy, but I'd like to highlight one particular table on there. It's the projects by category table. I brought copies, so if you don't mind, I can distribute those.
Make sure you get one to every single other person in the audience.
No. If Preston were here, you know, he was.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So the purpose of the CIP is really to lay out a 5-year plan for all of the capital projects that the city endeavors to, start or continue for that time period. Whenever we're communicating something to council, we should be referencing back to the CIP as a strategic document. It's built off the strategic plan, it's built off of council input, it's built off of your input. So you're probably looking through this at all of the categories. In total, if you look at page 2, I'll just point out a couple of the big numbers towards the end. For the 5-year plan, we have a $40 million CIP. That's a little bit more ambitious than we had a year ago and 2 years ago. So we have a lot of work that we have in front of us. For the first 2 years, which is what council specifically took action on in terms of appropriating money, we have $21 million. Of that, if you look at just the transportation elements over 5 years total $21 million. This is all on page 2. And in the first 2 years of the CIP, transportation elements total $10 million. So some of this is already in progress. We are halfway through 2018 already. So some of this is essentially just establishing what we're already intending to spend or what we're already moving towards, such as Marin Buchanan. And then other ones, these are projects that are continuing from the prior CIP, and we're simply moving on as we had intended to. We did provide input to council. In January, we gave them essentially an audience to look at this as a working session. They provided us some comments back, so we incorporated some new transportation-related projects at that time. I'm going to go through some of the highlights of the transportation elements. The first big one there on page 1 is the street rehabilitation project. And that's $2.7 million of funding in 2018 and then another $2.6 in 2019. I'm going to try to use the overhead projector here so we can look at a map.
If you hit the middle button, I think it focuses, right?
Zoom out.
Is the mast all the way up?
Ah, there's a mast. Well said.
I guess it is. Oh, no.
Or does it do this?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Hit the
Shiny.
focus button again. Okay, once more. There you go.
Well, I'm going to have Mark.
I can shift it around.
He's going to hold it up for me.
We can share.
We're pretty familiar with the streets, so, you know.
I'm sure you are. So this is This is the area around Albany Hill. This was identified as a priority area for 2018 street rehab. We would begin with a design element. So this year, the first part of this is just kicking off, where we brought in a design consultant to look at all of these streets, their current conditions, and recommend a treatment for them. That might be a full depth rehabilitation. It might simply be a slurry seal. So all of the streets in reds are those projects that are identified within their scope to evaluate and come back to us with a recommendation. The street portions that you don't see, we'll pull out and we'll look at those later. They didn't identify themselves as a priority, or they've been recently restored already, so the PCI is already high. So it's a project that it's very ambitious for us, but it gets us to a point where we've got some money that we didn't spend this summer, so we want to catch up with some of our street rehabilitation work. The other elements that are going to be going on this summer will be a sewer project, as well as East Bay Mud coming in with some pipeline replacements. So in terms of traffic, there will be some. There'll be some community coordination that we need to make sure that we're clear on. So the East Bay Mud work will begin in kind of the Nielsen area in the southeast quadrant of the city. This is positioned in kind of the northern west quadrant of the city. So we specifically wanted to keep those two apart, so we would have benefits to both communities, but they wouldn't be on top of each other. The other project that I wanted to highlight on page 2 was the streetwide traffic calming. So I think this commission is aware, probably more than I am, since I'm fairly new, that there is an existing backlog of street calming elements that you guys have expressed interest in, approved, and recommended. So those haven't been forgotten. Those, if you look at the project detail sheet, we specifically called a lot of that out. And so we have plans to do all of that. We spread the work out evenly over the next 5 years. So those things will be moving forward kind of on a strategic basis based on staff availability. The other things that we're obviously working on are things like open space, sewers, which I mentioned, sidewalks. So all of those are resource demanding. So the street calming was one that we specifically strategically laid out across 5 years rather than trying to do it all in the first 2 years. So those are really kind of the key transportation elements that I wanted to highlight. But if there's specific questions, we can certainly go through whatever you guys like.
Questions from the commission? Being that there's no audience, I think we can be a little less formal with separating our comments and our questions and comments, if that's all right with the commission. Robert?
By the way, good job on the report. It was great that you explained in some detail all of the funding sources and what they're eligible for, and so I really appreciated that. I saw there was a road rehab project on Evelyn that's funded by SB1, and that's going to be potentially on the ballot. It will be on the ballot for repeal. So what would happen to that project? I think it was
Yeah, so we're keeping an eye on that. So essentially, if it happens, we'll pay for that project out of our rehab budget. But I think if it does get repealed, there is a sort of a larger issue that some of the funding we have in the annual street rehab project is SB1 money. And so last year's or our current year allocation was something on the order of $100,000, I think $106,000, and that'll increase to about $300,000. So ongoing. So if that does get repealed, that will be an issue that we have to deal with. And one of the things we're going to do, now that we've completed this plan, we've initiated, well, let me take a step back. Last July, we initiated a planning study to really line out the 5-year plan of paving projects and sort of the resultant impact to pavement condition, and then look at what our long-term funding is to make sure that we're sort of maintaining the gains we're making by investing in our streets. And our intention, now that this plan is finished, we have a really good understanding of what the funding looks like, is finish that analysis, then come back to both traffic and safety and council to have that larger discussion. And I think that's one of the things we need to kind of keep on the radar of, hey, if we lose another $300,000 annually out of our pavement funds, that will have an impact, and we have to make that up. So, I mean, we're well aware of that. But I guess to your immediate question, if we do the Evelyn project, Evelyn needs to be done. So we would do it out of our general fund, as just or our other pavement money.
You sort of answered my second question, I think, but are you guys keeping track of life cycle costs for all of the assets of the city and then taking that and applying it to a CIP? So in transit, in my world, that's a huge topic right now, is that we just don't take care of our facilities, whether it's buses or bus yards, et cetera. And the feds are requiring us to submit asset management plans now. And then that has to feed into your CIP and just show, hey, we have no money, right? But I was wondering if that's a similar process for the city.
So it's not as formalized, but that's something we want to do, is and I think that's one of the issues that people have brought up in other places, particularly around parks and things where we're investing in construction, but do we have the resources to maintain and replace over time? So that's one of the things we're definitely looking at. But it's not as well developed as it probably should be.
Questions, comments?
Can I ask a question about?
Can you use the microphone?
Yeah, I can
Thank
do
you.
that. Sorry. I'm new here. I don't think it's in the backup, but I noticed under sewer storm drain in year 2020, there's a big bump. Do we know where that is? I mean, like, we keep bumping up against storm drain issues in some of these plans. I think it's storm drain, or drainage issues.
You're looking at the 1.8 million?
Yes, that year. The
So-
781,000 under storm drain rehabilitation. I guess that's rehabilitation. That's
Right.
not new drains. So
Give it a shot.
So there's a couple things going on. In another place here under storm drain, we're doing the watershed management plan update in this year and next year, and that's going to sort of inform what we need to do on storm drains.
Okay.
So we're expecting to ramp up our spending on the storm drain side on that. But your point about paving and storm drainage, and those are
different.
well, no, they're not. They're absolutely related. And I think we are working on trying to correct some of the localized problems that are attached to paving. So when we do, I think as part of the current paving plan, we anticipate that we're going to do curb ramps. We're going to fix drainage where we can, and we have going to council this next council meeting a design contract to go around the city and start looking at and fixing the drainage problems.
Okay. Thanks.
So the contract that Mark is referring to are localized sewer problems where drain inlets are substandard, maybe they're too small, where you see localized flooding, and so that's something to alleviate that immediately. What we're anticipating with this watershed management plan is really a focused look at the hydraulics of all of the watersheds in the city so that we understand if we have long-term capacity issues, what the extent of those capacity issues are, and then lay out a plan to deal with those. So you may see that this 780,000 may change in terms of how we can stage all of that work, but that's essentially, that represents the work we anticipate coming out of that watershed management plan.
Okay, thanks.
For you, your lips are moving.
Yeah. I apologize. I just, in looking at this list, I didn't check it before, but the Cornices Creek, San Pablo to 8th, that's the creek plus the path? Or just
Jeff's here.
Just the path.
So there are actually kind of two different projects there. There's from San Pablo to 10th, the path is completed as part of the UC Village project, but the creek needs to be restored.
Okay.
And that project will probably include removing the culvert that exists today at the end of 10th Street. The vehicles are closed off. There's some bollards there, but ideally from an ecological perspective, removing that culvert and opening up daylighting the creek across the street would be great. The second project, and actually the one we want to do first, and the one that we're hoping to start design on very shortly, is from 10th to 8th, which is essentially a new path around the existing Little League fields. Right now, there's kind of a there's a way to get around.
You can squeeze through.
You can squeeze through and create.
Not great for bikes.
Not great for anything. And do the best we can without disrupting the Little League, without getting into the creek itself. And that's a project where we'd like to design it this year and implement it as soon as we can do that.
Great. Thank you.
That's exciting. So, yeah, that was one of my comments. I'm excited that that's moving forward. It's an important connection. I'll talk about that later. You didn't put me on the agenda for my map, but I'm going to bring that up later anyway. It's okay. No, it's okay. We'll deal with it. A question about the Buchanan Bridge resurfacing. It looks like that's targeted to happen in 2021. I'm assuming you're coordinating so it's not happening at the same time as the Gilman Interchange building. Just say yes.
That will be coordinated.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I didn't say anything here about Kains and Adams.
So we have a number of projects that are sort of in the concept phase where there's still sort of staff side work that's done before we can really get a scope together and budget and put it on here for implementation. So I think there's Kains and Adams is one of them. I'm blanking on all of them right now, but there's a whole list of that we haven't forgotten.
Okay. Are those in the appendixes or somewhere back behind, or? I'm sorry, I haven't gotten that far in the document.
Actually, they're not as part of the document because that's, in our mind, this is where we do the execution. So what we don't want to do is have a bunch of placeholder money in the until we have a firm scope. It's just this is what we want to execute. So there's more maybe planning that needs to happen on those types of projects.
So the trigger, I'm sorry, the trigger point for us to put information into the CIP is when council might approve something to go, say, maybe into pre-design. So after staff work is done in terms of scoping and understanding what might be feasible with our budgets, it would come to council. Council would say proceed, and then at that point we might have enough to actually put a project description, schedule, and a preliminary budget together and put it into the CIP. Something similar with Albany Hill might be a good example where it didn't really need to be in the CIP until there was a point where you had an actual scope and you knew what you wanted to put in what place, and then it was fleshed out enough to put it into the document.
You mean Washington Avenue on the Hill?
Thank you.
Okay.
And it is flexible in the sense that we don't have to wait 5 years to update it. It's whenever we're ready and have it scoped, and we can add it to the plan.
So you haven't allocated all the money that's available for the next 5 years?
Well, no, we as projects come up, that's probably one of the things that happens is there's trade-offs. Is one project, are we going to push a project out to do another are we going to bump a project to
Okay.
do a project? So I think those discussions will happen. But there's definitely grant funding and other things available for different things.
I'll add, as you comb through all of the document and stay up
So we're all going to go home and just get into it.
Right. This is just the Sweet 16. You don't need to watch all the games. You can look. But Appendix B represents a kind of a balance sheet for all of the existing funds that the city has. I think there's about 30 of them, and that'll show you beginning balances and end balances for each year. So that shows you that we're not spending all of the city's money, but we have a plan to spend a good portion of it, $40 million.
So kind of in line with the last couple of points here, when I look at the grand totals across the bottom, it kind of looks like it's tapering off towards the end, but my assumption is that's just the grant funds that haven't come online yet, haven't been awarded essentially, but we expect every 2-year cycle thereabouts we're going to see more, so that'll keep stacking up.
That's correct. So we put in the funding that was anticipated, that we know with reasonable confidence, such as SB1, but if it's discretionary grant funding, we're chasing after it, and it'll show up when it gets here.
Perfect. Thank you.
As well as I think there is an issue in both the sewer and paving where we're front-loaded with money. So we probably have close to 10 million in sewer and paving in the first years, and I don't think we're close to that amount in the latter 3 years. So I think that's one of the things that skews that a bit.
I see.
Back on the your paving picture.
Yes.
We're prioritizing the crossing at Washington Avenue.
Right.
For a pretty substantial improvement to help get people across there. I'm very concerned about the condition of Washington Avenue between San Pablo and Key Route.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. I'm glad to see you nodding.
That's on our radar for we're looking at for the next year project. Yeah.
This actually has come up on the strollers and rollers discussion list. People have had physical problems turning off of the Greenway onto Washington Avenue because the pavement is so broken down that their bike tires don't have purchase. I happen to take that turn myself, and I believe it's a safety issue now.
Okay. We'll look at the plan. So just give you some. We chose these streets because there's lots of streets that are in poor condition. What we wanted to do is look at finishing an area, and then that area wasn't impacted with other projects such as the storm drains, the sewers, and the East Bay mud work. And so we didn't have a good handle on the rest of the city. And so what we wanted to do is not miss a construction window. So we chose an area that needed it. Everything in there, Washington, the lower part of Washington is another area that needs some.
West of San Pablo.
West of San Pablo is another area. And so we focused on that area to complete it. And we're confident that it would be we don't want to dig it up again. We don't want to pave something and turn around and dig it up. So that was some of our logic. But we can definitely look at that next reach and try to work that in as quickly as we can.
I would appreciate that. As I'm thinking about it, there has been construction on both Washington and Portland under the BART tracks as part of the fiber efforts in town. They've been shooting a lot of pipe under there to make connections, apparently. So there's some other challenges in that area beyond just the degradation of the old pavement.
Okay, we'll look at that and see what we can incorporate.
Thank you.
So we often talk about how fire trucks can maneuver in the different topics different projects we have. I see the fire truck replacement on this plan, and I want to make sure we note that the last time we talked about this, there are versions of the fire trucks that can maneuver better around our streets, and want to make sure that's captured.
And that have more visibility for pedestrians.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that's incorporated in this part of the project. So I don't know if this is the right place to say it, but
I can communicate that back to fire.
Great.
You might go as far as saying at least two of the commissioners would like this commission to be involved in the purchase of the next
Yeah,
fire truck.
that would be great.
I would go further and communicate that.
Thank you.
That was because you brought it up the first place.
Thanks for remembering.
I listened.
Other comments, questions?
No, just this great. Thank you.
Yeah, this
Thank you
is
very much
really,
for sharing the
really
information.
great.
And sticking it out to come explain it to us.
Exactly.
Not a problem. Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Let's move on to item 6.5, report on the State of California Active Transportation Program Cycle 4 funding.
So this is just a brief kind of preview of a major grant program that funds the kind of projects that we get excited about here in Albany. It will be coming forward. What was submitted or is included in your agenda materials is a draft of the Active Transportation Plan guidelines. And I understand the California Transportation Commission looked at this week, and it'll be finalized sometime in the near future, with ultimately a time frame of deadline for us to submit projects for an application in July. And we'll be working, the Community Development Department and Public Works Department are going to be getting together to figure out how we're going to collaborate on preparing this. It's strictly informational for you, but if you had a chance to look through it, and maybe there's an opportunity for me to introduce Justin Freed, who's a new staff person who's helping the Community Development Department in a number of areas, but right now particularly transportation as we make the transition in staffing. And Justin was kind enough to look at this carefully and highlighted for me a few things that the goals and objectives of this grant program. They're really into, to kind of cut to the chase, some of the examples that they give are development of new bikeways and walkways, improvements to existing bikeways and walkways, elimination, in particular, elimination of hazardous conditions, installation of traffic control devices to improve the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. And as an example, we recognize the Masonic and Solano, Masonic and Marin intersections are particular intersections that have been pointed out, and commission's heard about it, and the council has given us direction that they feel those are high priority projects. So we're thinking that might be a good candidate for a grant application. And then they also fund recreational trails and trailheads. So although the big project that's about to start construction in the next couple of months is the East Bay Regional Park District Bay Trail, there's perhaps other things the city can do to improve connections to that on the waterfront. And then they also do provide some non-infrastructure funding for things like safe routes to schools. So we'll be looking at all this very carefully, and we'll keep the commission up to date, and ultimately we go to city council for their authorization to submit a grant application, and we'll be doing that probably in the June timeframe, I would think. So I don't have anything more to add. If you have any particular questions, myself or probably more likely Justin or Robert, if you went to a seminar on this in Sacramento, and so both Robert and Justin are actually much more informed than I am about it, so I'll let them answer any of your questions.
I forget, I think we might have spoken about this the other day, but I'm losing it a little bit. Currently, we allow sidewalk riding between the cycle track on San Pablo north to Buchanan pathway. Would that be a potential, or is that?
It's a potential one. That is, it's a question of prioritizing. It is if it were improved, it would be an important connection. I don't think it's one that we identified in the CIP as relying on this.
It's the last one.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
2019, 2020, mostly 2020.
So in the text of the CIP, there's a specific table regarding funding overview, and I can send you a link to that specific page, but there's about 6 or 7 projects there that are identified specifically and how we're going to fund those. Some of them those are coming from year-end surplus, which is as we wrap up the audit, those will be funded. 2 of them are specifically called out for ATP grant, which is part of this cycle 4. One is the Masonic Marin intersection changes, which we just talked about, and the other one is the Complete Streets San Pablo Buchanan, which is, I think, portions of San Pablo in the Buchanan area.
We just looked at that last
Yeah,
meeting,
yeah. So that one is, those 2 items are specifically strong enough and they fit the criteria. And now that I know we have help in community development, we can go back and really make sure that our applications line up with that criteria. The cycle track, I think, was in a year, maybe 2019 or 2020. Which could be another cycle. We can look at that for future funding. But in terms of where we are now, it made sense. Oh, thank you. It made sense for us to thank you, Jeff, to look at this. So this is the table I was referring to. 7 projects with different funding sources. The first 2 are from the general fund. The next 2, Complete Streets, San Pablo and Masonic, are from ATP and some. Again, the call for projects is anticipated in May. It sounds like it's one step closer to getting there, and then the applications are due in July. So we've got the funding, unfunded amounts here in front of us, and then the cycle track is identified for applying for funding from Measure BB, $720,000. And then we put in fire as well, because there's a gap in funding for fire that we just need to look at.
Okay. Other questions? Comments? Great. So we're going to move on to announcements and communications. Would you mind if I went first?
Sure.
Okay. As part of my Albany Strollers and Rollers activities, in fact, I partnered with Preston Jordan to create this Albany's most relaxed bike routes map. Just keep passing those around. And the goal with this map, particularly at this time, was to target the Little League and the soccer club. So we partnered with them. They put in some money for printing, and we were out at opening day for both organizations on Saturday. And we were specifically targeting families and getting them to the fields on the most relaxed bike routes that exist today in Albany. We took a concept that is kind of new of using a transit-style map to sort of go past the details of how you get places and focus on the destination locations. So I am soliciting feedback on this. It's for a specific purpose, and as a non-governmental organization, we were able to not necessarily be egalitarian about the various areas of the city and just focus on what is actually possible. I've certainly gotten that feedback already. But we're certainly looking for feedback on ways to make this useful in the future, and you may see other types of maps or this map used for other goals. And if anybody has a use for this map and would like to take it further, I'm sure we can make the files available.
That's cool. Is there a rationale to the different colors?
You know, I've been asked that before. First of all, I'm a primary color type person. And you notice that some of the colors align well with the Albany Strollers and Rollers logo.
There you go.
Beyond that, Mostly, the similar colors are located in separate areas of the map,
Okay.
and it's just a matter of differentiation. Yes.
That's great.
It was fun to do. I really enjoy this sort
And
of
it
thing.
makes it look more like the tube or
Yeah.
the metro or.
Yeah, almost sexy, yeah.
It's aesthetic. It's not informational, I think.
Well, I think it is informational, especially the back. You know,
But
the
the
detail.
specific choice of colors isn't.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, thank you.
It's to make it look more like a subway map.
Yes, correct. The primary colors do make it look very basic, like a subway map. And we hope to be adding to these routes in the near future. You know, with the Gilman project, hopefully that'll make a most relaxed route all the way down to the Bates Fields at Gilman. And perhaps with the Washington crossing, we'll be able to connect the Albany Hill area. So stay tuned. And you can find a PDF version of this on the Albany Strollers and Rollers website. On the homepage, there's an article on this, and it links to a PDF. And I have more copies if you're interested in spreading them around. Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence. Let's move on to item 7.1.
7.1 and 7.2 are somewhat related, so just putting it up on the screen, some potential agenda items. What
Jeff, shall I mention, Jeff and I had a meeting last week, and we both found that the future agenda items tend to fluctuate greatly, and it wasn't really functioning as a great tool for figuring out what was happening when. There's only so much you can put on the agenda. It's a little more fluid than that. So we decided to go to a slide presentation mode with the idea that this would be a tool that the commission could use with staff to look at the upcoming months a little more clearly, and that the chair could use with staff offline to do planning in between the meetings.
And thank you for that. That's right. Thank you for saying that. And also not to leave the impression sometimes with members of the public when they read the agenda, like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's going to be there, right? That's what you said on the agenda. And in a lot of cases, we're speculating or hoping. So anyhow, these are potential upcoming agenda items. What's new here that I didn't have a chance to discuss with the chair because it was not something I was aware of. The police chief would like to make a presentation to you on two things. First is the often hot issue of elementary school crossing guards. The police department and the city manager are working through some things, and by next month, we'd like to be able to preview for the commission and get commission reaction and have you take some probably considerable public comment on a crossing guard program. And then, as we've talked about, having the police chief also discuss some of the trends that you look at every meeting. And then one of the things that Justin is starting to look at, and we hope to be able to give you some ideas of kind of interim measures that we might use for the Masonic and Marin and Masonic and Solano intersection, some signage. Again, that was something that came from council the other night, and just something to help improve the motorist behavior and everybody's behavior at those intersections. So we might have that ready. The other challenge with the April meeting is many of you have middle school kids, and you have a middle school open house that night. And Chief McQuiston teaches a course on Thursday nights. So if we're dealing with something that has to do with the school district, plus your own families, plus the chief's availability, it makes sense to explore maybe an alternative night for a commission meeting in April. This room is available on Monday, April 30th. It's the 5th Monday, so it's not booked. And just putting that out there for you. And I know that in my discussions with the chief, he would greatly appreciate that, so that he doesn't have to interrupt his program, his teaching responsibilities. So putting that forward for your discussion. You don't have to make a final decision about that tonight, but we would like to firm it up relatively soon, the next couple of weeks.
Who can say that they would be available that Monday night, April 30th?
Mostly.
Mostly.
I might have some travel coming up, but right now it's clear.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Harry, you raised your hand? Right, and yep. Oh, great.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and plan on rescheduling and not have it on your regular fourth Thursday, and that we'll do it on that fifth Monday. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're happy to accommodate the chief, too.
Yeah.
So,
Thank
you for being flexible with our school schedules.
Then with respect to some of the other agenda items, I don't think there's anything here that needs extensive discussion. I will work with Commissioner Chomsky to play with the data on traffic counts. And as I've been thinking about how we present things to you, I think I'd like to make a presentation or proposal to you to reorganize how we process traffic calming applications. And one of the things that I know is challenging for the Public Works Department is they have a certain cycle of implementing projects, and maybe integrate our planning process to more closely support how they actually implement projects, so it's more seamless, rather than to do the planning, tell somebody, oh yeah, you're going to get a speed hump, and then not really have a way to implement it smoothly. So make it a seamless project transition. And then maybe do it once or twice a year rather than just kind of randomly. It would make it easier for us and give you some context and help you prioritize potential traffic calming measures that you would want to implement. Everything else here is something that's been discussed at various meetings in the past, and we're just keeping them on the list of things that we know we need to keep you involved with. If there are other things that you'd like us to consider the next few months, this is a great time to let us know, or just send us an email.
You're going to add the gig car share update at some point.
That would be probably
Off the
more
bottom
like
of the- yeah.
October,
Yeah.
November, but yes.
I think there are a lot of items that will be on the agenda in October that are not listed here, right?
The school district is pressing ahead with their high school building plans. So I'm assuming at some point in the next 6 to 9 months, we're going to look at that construction, traffic plan, potentially.
I don't know that they're looking at, what I understand they're considering is a new classroom building in the middle of their campus in the, I guess it's called the amphitheater area. I don't know of any proposal from them to modify their traffic management plan.
Okay.
So when the middle school project came up, we had to consider the closure of sidewalks. And it sounds like you're saying there won't be any effect to public streets or sidewalks from the high school project?
It's in the center of campus, so they haven't talked to us about that.
There is a significant impact of the construction on access to the bike parking on campus. So they may need to locate a significant number of bike racks off of campus.
If there is an impact on the public right-of-way, you'll definitely see it. They haven't approached us about that.
So something for September or October, and this may be something you want to discuss with the city manager or city attorney, is whether or not to provide an information report to the commission on the potential impacts of SB 1 being rescinded. Obviously not something we necessarily take action on, but certainly of interest to us and maybe of general public interest.
Also, I think July would be the end of the 6 month. Is it a 6 month pilot with Line Bike?
That would be July.
Did we have a time period?
I think it was, did it start like in January or February?
It started in
That was 6 months.
January. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the exact date either, but it would We did talk about roughly a 6-month follow-up, so it would either be at your July meeting or maybe your September meeting. We'll
Thanks. All right. Well, we're coming in just under the wire. Are there any further announcements or requests? Great. With that, thank you all and close the meeting.